thirsty heads. A perfumed thank you they seemed to say. Surely here was charm beyond compare to view. Maybe it was just that I was there with you. 'Twas just a garden in the rain, but then the sun came out again and sent us happily on our way. I recall a summer's day when you and I had strolled away, and suddenly a storm drew nigh. Seeking shelter from the rain, we hurried down a little lane and found a lovely spot nearby. 'Twas just a garden in the rain, close to a little
Hello. Welcome in, welcome in. How are you doing? I hope you're having a wonderful day, night, morning, evening, whatever it is for you. I am the Morbid Moth. And yeah, today's a nice relaxing day for us. You have all been requesting I do another reading stream. Goodness knows why, because I can barely pronounce half the bloody words in these. But we're going to be doing a reading of The Rats in the Walls by H.P. Lovecraft. Sorry I'm a little bit later today. I'm experimenting doing different times and such just to see how my day fits in, whether I do things in the morning, afternoon, evening, etc. Just trying to find what works best for both me and you guys, really. Welcome in, Lord and Sneak Games. Delight to see you. Of course, TRC Rays and Malice King Phantom. As well as Deer, of course. Now, as you've noticed, the redeems and such are off. So you can't, well, apart from motivation. Same as most things. So those who haven't been to a reading stream before, it is literally that. I sit here and I read a book at you and you will fall asleep apparently. So, and that's a good thing though. There will be, you can have egg. It's loading up, but for example, all the Tangia, you can still redeem them, but they will be muted. So I would recommend you don't redeem any of that kind of thing. So the blurps are muted, the alerts are muted, everything is muted besides there's you, me, and the background music, which will change. We won't be having just general music. We'll have a nice little ambience in the background. But I hope you're doing well. Thank you for being here. You can tell something. Well, I suppose so. It depends. Is it going to incriminate you? IEP? Oh, well, that's good, Mobs. Hopefully you get some nice rest. Yeah, so... Actually, I'm going to make another text. That's a good point. We'll do another text. And then if I put... all... I don't know, sound. That way people can't be like, me? I redeemed a thing! And I'll be like, well, tough titties. Okay. Why is it so big? Okay, we'll fix that. Let me give it a background, that way people can see it. Hello, Shadow Panda, how are you doing? Thank you for dropping on by. Why is the default font always Arial? Makes me sad. Ew, don't turn it italic. Why did you go italic for? Make it good Lord, what is with this? But yeah, like I said, we are literally just here. We're going to be talking, we're going to be reading. What font is this? Century School book. Well, that should be the same then. Why is it not being the same? It also means we get a nice up close. There we go, we'll pop that up there. You're living life, aren't we all? I love to crab. And Dear loves to egg, so you're in good company. But yes, welcome in everyone. It's a pleasure to have you here. Like I said, we'll be reading The Rats on the Walls by H.P. Lovecraft. Now, I normally do a little disclaimer before we start the reading. Obviously, please bear in mind. I hope you didn't read my comment. What crab? Laxon, hello, how are you? If beautiful was a sin, you'd never be forgiven. Reading that as an egg makes it all the better, may I say. Oh, thank you very much. That's very, very sweet of you. I know, we've got 2 motivations to do. I know, we'll do the motivation. And with some background. Well, not music, but ambiance. Oh, should be loading. This is the kind of ambience we're going to have as a reading. So before I go in and we do the motivation redeems, I just want to say, please be aware that these novels, as you know, I can only read uncopyrighted stuff. H.P. Lovecraft obviously is, open for public domain and such. Which means that I can read it. It's also why we tend to stick to the older novels, because they can actually be read without any kind of copyright, nonsense. Also, it does mean, because they are old, are written, I'm going to do the little Disney exclaimer, they are pieces of their time. Views, words, and other contexts which aren't necessarily seen in the best light nowadays, but are indeed works of. Please remember that. Femboy Misa, welcome in. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you. As I read, I will still be trying to read. But obviously, if I don't reply, please do not be offended. It's because I'm reading the book. I can't read. I will stumble on my words. I will make mistakes. This is like a casual reading. This is like someone just reading a book to you. A professional reading. It's not anything like that. It's literally just me reading. Good old friend, a novel. I will laugh. I will stumble. I will muggle my words up, and I will be changing some words, because some words cannot be read. Welcome, Mark 2. Thank you for the follow, and thank you for the compliments, Femboy Misa. Very kind of you, thank you. Fun fact, most people have an above average number of arms. Oh. I suppose you learn something new every day, don't you? I will try and keep my voice soft. I will try and keep it, well, audible and all of that. Please let me know, though, if I need to get closer, further away. Now, we do have 2 motivation redeems, so before we get into things, and before we get too cozy and comfortable, we're going to have to do 2 motivations. Which is honestly absolutely fine by me. So let me okay. That off for a second. The first motivation is for Mobs. If you're still here, thank you, Mobs. Your motivation, my lovely, is the solution to life on Earth is toxoplasmosis. Bloody hell is toxoplasmosis. Hang on. Ew, that's gross. It's an infection you get from cats. From cat poo. It's a parasite you get from cat poo. Toxoplasmosis. You are Malice. You learn something new every day, don't you? Oops, I'm gonna redo that one for you. I don't think. Without living, there can be no thought. There you go. That's a bit more apt. That one makes sense. But we normally do third time's a charm. So mobs, third time's a charm. Be a jerk. Don't ask for a miracle. Welcome in, Frosty. How are you doing? Darling, the whole stream's an awkward time. You should know this by now. The next motivation is for you, dear. Your motivation is: the men and women who expect lovers are not as lost as the men and women who expect kings. You could get some deep philosophical context out of that. But you know. But monogamy, well, thank you for the first time and welcome in. I forgot a whole word, did I? What did I? Oh, thank you for the follow. That's very kind of you. I expect King Charles. Look, I'll redo it for you. The royal. Look, you know I have difficulty staying quiet as it is, but when you type in I expect King Charles and then the motivation comes up with the royal palace is practically speaking toward a torture chamber. Okay, third time's a charm, as always, dear. A shark. You might regret it. There you are. That makes sense, sure. Can you even show shirtless men on Twitch nowadays? He's into be. Don't you start with that. Now, how is the audio? I've turned on video I was going to put on. A bit more ambiance. But yes, welcome in everyone. We're going to be doing reading of Rats in the Walls. Again, I will just reiterate, the casual reading. I will make mistakes. I will fumble. I will giggle. I will lose my place. I will not be able to pronounce words. There will also be some words that, as I said before, I cannot say on Twitch, so they will be sent. Please remember, this is a right of its time. So, like I said, there will be some things that might be, you know, that just come from the era that it was written in. Anyone can join my Discord, of course you can. Right. Thank you. No, thank you. Always a pleasure to have people join the Discord. I've read this. Ooh, very nice. Then you know, well, those who know of Lovecraft know there's a certain cat he has that I can't pronounce the name of. So that cat will be referred to as Mr. Cat. Ooh, in a way, monogamy. In a way. You'll see, you'll find out. Now, it's not incredibly long, but it is long enough to get a good chunk of reading. And then it's up to you guys whether we continue reading from there, games or something. I know sometimes you're like, right, yeah, that'll do. I definitely can't say that. Oh no, no, I can't refund. I tell you what, let me turn the audio on very quick, just so you have the voice once it pops up. But Ahmed, we're having.
Seems like you can't stay away from my smooth, sultry voice. Oh, you are reading Lovecraft. How about we go and really craft some love?
Honestly, there you are. I turned that on just for you because I know you enjoy that. But please note all alerts and sounds are off from now on. So if you do redeem something, I can't help you there. Unless I can actually refund it, I won't be able to. I put that there. Well, hello, caffeinated wisp. How are you doing? Well, just in time for us to start, really. I hope everyone is doing well. I hope you're taking care. I hope you're having a wonderful day, night, morning, evening, whatever it is for you. I hope you're doing well. Well, I'm doing well, thank you. I'm doing very well. Now then. Up to you all if I keep the reading attire on, but I quite like it. Anto posted about it. Oh, to be kind of them. Goodness. Oh, I'm very touched by that. You. Very much. Guitar. Cheeky little thing. Maybe clicking about. I'm trying to get an argument. Thank you for the hydrate. As you can see, you give me an extra in my reading gears. Lots of fun. More people should. Oh, stop it. Malice, stop it. You're being too nice again. We've had this. No need for that. I can't believe Mothy's reading a book all about shit. Don't make me laugh. We're supposed to be speaking properly here. Mika, welcome in. It is. Well, I wouldn't class it as ASMR, but there's not really another category for reading into a microphone like this because people like your voice. You get what I mean? We do have good tea and biscuits. You're quite right, Jay. You're quite right. Now then, shall we begin? Again, if I need to turn volumes up or down, let me know. I will try my best to keep. I am reading. The Rats and the Walls by H.P. Lovecraft. On July 16th, 1923, I moved into Exton Priory after the last workman had finished his labours. The restoration had been a stupendous task, for little had remained of the deserted pile but a shell-like ruin. Yet because it had been the seat of my ancestors, I let no expense deter me. The place had not been inhabited since the reign of James I, when a tragedy of intensely hideous, though largely unexplained nature had struck down the master, 5 of his children, and so driven the fourth under a cloud of suspicion and terror, third son, my lineal progenitor and the only survivor of the abhorred line. With his sole heir denounced as a murderer, the estate had reverted to the crown, nor had the man made any attempt to manipulate or regain his property. Shaken by some horror greater than that of conscience or the law, and expressing only a frantic wish to remove the ancient edifice from the sight and memory, Walter de la Poer, 11th Baron Exon, fled to Virginia and there founded the family which by the next century had become known as de la Poer. Exon Primary has remained unattended, though later allotted to the estates of the Norris family, and much studied because of the composite architecture, an architecture involving the Gothic towers resting on a Saxon or Romanesque substance. The foundation, in turn, was of still earlier order or blend of orders, Roman and Druidic or native Cymric, if legend speaks truly. This foundation was a very singular thing, being merged on one side with solid limestone, whose brink the priory overlooked a desolate valley 3 miles west of the village of Ancus. Architects and antiquarians loved to examine this strange relic of 400 centuries, but the country folk hated it. They had hated it hundreds of years before, when my ancestors were there, and they hated it now, the moss and the mould of abandonment. I had not been a day in Manchester before a news became of it occurred, and this week workmen have blown up an ex-priory, and are busy obliterating the traces of its founding. The bare statistics of my ancestry I'd always known, and together with the fact that my first American forebear had come to the colony. Of detail, however, I'd been kept wholly ignorant, through the policy of reticence always maintained by them. Unlike our planter neighbours, we seldom boasted of crusading ancestors or medieval Renaissance, nor was any kind of tradition handed down that what may have been the Civil War led every squire to his eldest son of posthumous open. The glories we cherished were those archived since the migration, the glories of a proud and honourable, if somewhat reserved on social. During the war, our fortunes were extinguished, and our whole existence changed by the burning of Carfax, our home on the banks of the James. My grandfather, advanced in years, had perished in that incendiary outrage, and with him the envelope that bound us all. I can recall that fire, as I saw it then at the age of 7, with the Federal soldiers shouting, the women screaming, and the slaves howling and praying. My father was in the army, defending Richmond, and after many formalities, my mother and I would pass through the lines. When the war ended, we all moved north, whence my mother had come, and I grew into manhood, middle-aged, ultimate wealth, stalled Yankee. Neither my father nor I ever knew what our hereditary uncle contained, and I merged into the greyness of Massachusetts. I can never say Massachusetts. That place, business life. I lost all interest in the mystery, evidently left far back, I found. Had I suspected their nature, how gladly I would have left Exon Priory to its moss, spats, and cobwebs. My father died in 1904, but without any message to leave me or to my own child, Alfred, motherless boy of 10. It was this boy who reversed the order of the family information, for although I could give him only a jesting lecture past, he wrote me some of very interesting ancestral legends the late war took him to England, 17, as an aviation officer. Apparently, the Deadapole had a colourful and perhaps sinister history, for a friend of my son's, Captain Edward Norris of the Royal Flying Corps, dwelt near the family seat at Anchester, and related some of the pleasant stories few novelists could equal for wildness and ability. Norris himself, of course, did not take them seriously, but They amused my son and made good material for his letters to me. It was this legendary which definitely turned my attention to translating heritage, and made me resolve to purchase and restore the family seat of Norris Shrew to Alfred in its picturesque desertion, and offered him at a surprisingly reasonable figure, since his own uncle, the present owner. I bought Exham Primary in 1918, but it was almost immediately distracted from my plan history at the return of my son, maimed in. During the 2 years that he lived, I thought of nothing but his care, having given a place to my business in the direction of partners. In 1921, I found relieved and aimless. A retired manufacturer, no longer young, resolved to divert my years with my new. Visiting Manchester in December, I was entertained by Captain Norris, a plump, amiable young man who had thought much of my son, and secured his assistance in gathering plans, anecdotes to guide, and Exham Priory itself I saw without emotion, just a jumble of tottering medieval ruins covered with lichen and honeycombed with rock snakes, perched perilously upon a precipice, and denuded of floors or other interior features save the stone walls and towers. As I gradually recovered the image of the edifice that had been when my ancestor left it 3 centuries before, I began to hire workmen for the reconstruction. In every case, I was forced to go outside and immediately locality, for the Manchester villagers had an almost unbelievable fear and the sentiment was so great that it was sometimes communicated to the outside labourers, causing numerous desertions, while its scope appeared to include both the prairie and family. Thank you for the smile, Orbital. Doing well today. My son had told me that he was somewhat avoided during his visits, because he was a de la poor, and I found myself subtly ostracized for a like reason until I convinced the peasants how little I knew. Even then they sullenly disliked me, so that I had to collect most of the village traditions through the mediation of Norris. What the people could not forgive, perhaps, was that I had come to restore a symbol so abhorrent to them, rationally or not. They viewed Exham Priory nothing less than a haunt of fiends and werewolves. Piecing together the tales which Norris collected for me, and supplementing them with the accounts of several savants who had studied the ruins, I deduced that Exham Priory stood on the site of a prehistoric temple, a traditional or anti-traditional thing which must have been a contemporary Stonehenge. That indescribable rites had been celebrated there, few doubted, and there were unpleasant tales of the transference of these rites into the Sibyl worship which the Romans had introduced. Inscriptions still visible in the sub-cellar bore unmistakable letters such as D.I.V. O.P.S. Magna Mad, sign of the Magna Mater whose dark worship was once vainly forbidden to Roman citizens. Manchester had been the camp of the 3rd Augustan Legion, as many remains attest, and it was said that the Temple of Sillaby was splendid and thronged with worshippers who performed nameless ceremonies at bidding of the Ferragan priest. Welcome, Ensley. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the 5 streams. Also, I am so sorry if I'm butchering any of these names. Tales added that the fall of the old religion did not end the orgies at the temple, but that the priest lives on in the new faith without a real shield. Likewise was said that the rites did not vanish with the Roman power, and that certain among the Saxons added to what remained of the temple, gave it the essential outline it subsequently preserved, making it the center of a cult feared through half of Heptarchy. How scandalous, I know, how dare I? Oh, shepherd, stop. Shouldn't you be working? About 1000 AD, the place is mentioned in a chronicle as being substantial stone priory housing of a strange and powerful monastic order and surrounded by extensive gardens which needed no walls to exclude a frightened populace. It was never destroyed by the Danes, though after the Norman conquest it must have declined tremendously, as there was no impediment when Henry III granted the ancestor Gilbert de la Poer, the first Baron Exam, in 1201. Of my family before this date there is no evil to report, but something strange must have happened then. In one chronicle there is a reference to a de la Poer as cursed of God in 1307, while a village legendary had nothing but evil and frantic fear to tell of the cult that went up on the foundations of the old temple and priory. The fireside tales were of the most grisly description, all the ghastlier because of their frightened retinence and cloudy evasive. They represented my ancestors as the race of hereditary demons, besides whom Gilles de Vresse and the Marquis de Sade would seem the barest terror, and hinted whisperingly at the responsibility for the occasional disappearance of villagers throughout several generations. The worst characters, apparently, were the barons and the direct heirs, at least, most. If of healthier inclination, it was said an heir would early and mysteriously die to make way for another more typical scion. There seemed to be an inner cult in the family, presided over by the head of the house and sometimes closed except to a few members. Temperament, rather than ancestry, was evidently the basis of the cult, but it was entered by several who married into the family. Lady Margaret Trevor from Cornwall, wife of Godfrey, the second son of the 5th Baron, became a favourite bane of children all over the countryside, and the demon heroine of a particularly horrible old ballad not yet extinct near the Welsh border. Preserved in balladry too, though not as illustrating the same point, is the hideous tale of Lady Mary de la Poer, who shortly after her marriage to the Earl of Shrewsfield was killed by him and his mother, both of the slayers being absolved and blessed by the priest, to whom they confessed that they dared not repeat the world. These myths and ballads, typical as they were crude of superstition, repelled me greatly. The persistence and their application to so long a line of my ancestors were especially annoying, while the imputations of monstrous habits proved unpleasantly reminiscent of the one scandal of my immediate forebears. The case of my cousin, young Rudolph de la Poer, Arfak, who went among the slaves and became a voodoo priest after he returned from. I was much less disturbed by the vague tales of wails and howlings in the barren, windswept valley beneath the limestone, graveyard stenches, and the spring rains of floundering, squealing white thing, on which Sir John's Clave's horse had trodden one night in a lonely field, and of the servant who had gone mad at what point he saw in the priory the full light of day. These things were hackneyed spectral lore, and I was at the time pronounced sceptic. The announced that the peasants were less to be diminished, though not especially significant in the view of a medieval. Prying curiosity meant death, and more than one severed head had been publicly strewn on the bastion, now efficated, around. A few more of the tales were exceedingly picturesque. They made me wish I'd learnt more of the comparative mythology. There was, for instance, the belief that a legion of battle-winged devils kept witches' Sabbath each night at the priory, a legion whose sustenance might explain the disproportionate abundance of vegetables harvested in the vast gardens. And most vivid of all, there was the dramatic epic altar of the rats, the scampering army of obscene vermin which had burst forth from the castle 3 months after the tragedy that doomed it to desertion. The lean, filthy, ravenous army which has swept all before it and devoured fowl, cats, dogs, hogs, sheep, and even 2 hapless human beings before its fury was spent. Around that unforgettable rodent army, a whole separate cycle of myth rolls, for it scattered among the village homes and brought curses and horrors. Thank you for the first time chat of Elgor, and thank you for the follow, Eugene Crab. Welcome in. I hope you're all having a wonderful day today. And a good morning to you, Bleeding Dino Love. How are you doing? Stopping by. Such was the law that assailed me as I pushed into completion, with an elderly obstinacy, the work of restoring my ancestral. It must not be imagined for a moment these tales formed principal psychological environment. On the other hand, I was constantly praised and encouraged by Captain Norris and the antiquarians who surrounded and aided me. When the task was done, over 2 years after its commencement, I viewed the great rooms, wainscoted walls, vaulted ceilings, mullioned windows, and broad staircase with a pride which fully compensated for the prodigious expense of the restoration. Every attribute of the Middle Ages was cunningly reproduced, and the new parts blended perfectly with the original walls and foundations. The seat of my fathers was complete, and I looked forward to redeeming at last the local fame of the line which has ended in me. I would reside here permanently, and prove that a Delapour, for I'd adopted again the original spelling of my name, need not be a fiend. But rather, the comfort was perhaps augmented by the fact that, though Exham Priory was medievally fitted, its interior wasn't wholly new and free from old vermin and old like. When Moth reads me bedtime stories midday, it's always eldritch horror. Well, I'm glad you're not disappointed then. This is how you get it. I'm glad you enjoy this type of stream. I know it's quite different to what is usually around. And I know it's not the most professional or most necessarily, lively. But it's certainly a little, well, I find it comforting. I hope you do too. Fungus, welcome in. Thank you for stopping by. I am indeed reading. Hope you're doing well. You're not new here, but I will do the voice for you. Hello, Governor. Take a sippy sip of a drink. The newest. Cheeky little mushroom. As I have said, I moved in on July 16th, 1923. My household consisted of 7 servants and 9 cats, of which the latter species I'm particularly fond. My eldest cat, Mr. Man, was 7 years old and had come from me from my home in Bolton, Massachusetts. The others I'd accumulated while living with Captain Norman's family, the restoration of the priory. For 5 days our routine proceeded with the utmost placidity, my time being spent mostly in the codification of old family data. I had now obtained some very circumstantial accounts of the final tragedy and flight of Walter de la Poer, which I conceived to be the most probable contents of the hereditary lost in the fire. It appeared that my ancestor was accused with much reason of having killed all the other members of his household, except 4 servant confederates in their sleep, about 2 weeks after a shocking discovery which changed his demeanour, but which, except by implication, he disclosed to no one, save perhaps the servants who assisted him and afterwards fled beyond reach. The deliberate slaughter, which included a father, a 3 brothers and 2 sisters was largely condoned by the villagers, and so slackly treated by the law that its perpetrator escaped honoured, unharmed, and undisguised to Virginia. The general whispered sentiment being that he had purged the land of immemorial curse. But what discovery had prompted an act so terrible, I could scarcely even conjecture. Walter de la Peur must have known for years the tales about his family, so that even material could have given him no fresh input. Had he, then, witnessed something so appalling, some ancient rite, or stumbled upon some frightful and revealing symbol in the priory of the vicinity? He was reputed to have been a shy, gentle youth in England. In Virginia, he seemed not so much hard or bitter as harassed and apprehensive. He was spoken of in the diary of another gentleman adventurer, Francis Harley Bellevue, as a man of unexampled justice, honour, and delicacy. He for the follow the black path very much. And femboy me so fine. Again, I'll do the voice. Normally there's a sound alert that plays, you see, but for some reason people like it when I go, "Hello, governor." Are indeed new here, though. Yeah, hello. It's been a while since the reading stream. On July 22nd, occurred the first incident which, though lightly dismissed at the time, takes on a preternatural significance in relation to later events. It was so simple as to be negligible, and I could not possibly be noticed under circumstances. For it must be recalled that since I was in a building practically fresh and new except for the walls, and surrounded by a well-balanced staff of servitors, apprehension would have been absurd despite the locality. What I afterward remembered is merely this, that my old black cat, whose moves I know so well, was undoubtedly alert and anxious to an extent wholly out of his keeping with his natural character. He roved from room to room, restless and disturbed, and sniffed constantly about the walls which formed part of the old Gothic structure. I realise how trite this sounds, like the inevitable dog in the ghost story, which always growls before his master sees the sheeted figure, yet I cannot consistently suppress it. The following day, a servant complained of restlessness among all the cats in the house. He came to me in my study, a lofty west room on the 2nd story with groined art, black oak panelling, and a triple Gothic window overlooking the limestone cliff and desolate valley. And even as he spoke, I saw the jetty form of Mr. Man creeping along the west wall and scratching at the new panels which overlaid the ancient stone. I told the man that there must be some singular odour or emanation from the old stonework, imperceptible to human senses, but affecting the delicate organs of cats even through the new woodwork. This I truly believed, and when the fellow suggested the presence of mice or rats, I mentioned that there had been no rats there for 300 years, and that even the field of mice surrounding the country could hardly be found in these high walls, where they had never been known to stray. That afternoon I called on Captain Norris, and he assured me that it was quite incredible to find field mice to infest the priory in such a sudden and unprecedented. That night, dispensing as usual with a valet, I retired in the West Tower chamber, which I had chosen as my own, reached from the study by a stone staircase and short gallery, the former partly ancient and the latter entirely restored. The room was circular, very high, and without wainscoting being hung with arras which I had myself chosen in London. Seeing that Mr. Mad was with me, I shut the heavy Gothic door and retired by the light of the electric light bulbs which so cleverly counterfeited candles, finally switching off the light and sinking on the carved and canopied four-poster, with the venerable cat in its accustomed. I did not draw the curtain, but gazed out at the narrow north window which I faced. There was a suspicion of aurora in the sky, and delicate traceries of the window were pleasant. At some time I must have fallen quietly asleep, for I recalled a distant sense of leaving strange dreams, when the cat started violently from his placid position. I saw him in the faint all below. It strained forward, 4 feet on my ankles, and the hind feet stretched behind. He was looking intensely at a point in the wall somewhat west of the window, a point to which my eye had knew nothing to mark it, but towards which all my attention was now directed. And, as I watched, I knew that Mr. Man was not vainly excited. Whether the arrows actually moved, I cannot say. I think it did. Very slightly. But what I can swear to it, that behind I heard a low, distinct scurrying of rats or mice. And within a moment, the cat had jumped bodily onto the screening tapestry, bringing the affected section to the floor with his weight and exposing a damp, ancient wall of stone, patched here and there by restoration, but devoid of any trace of rodent prowlers. Mr. Man raced up and down the floor by part of the wall, rolling the fallen arrow and seemingly trying at times to insert a paw between the wall and the oaken floor. He found nothing, and after a time returned wearily to his place at my feet. I had not moved, but I did not sleep again the rest of the night. In the morning, I questioned all the servants, and found that none of them had noticed anything unusual, save that the cook remembered the actions of a cat which had rested on her windowsill. This cat had howled at some unknown hour of the night, awaking the cook in time for her to see him dart purposely out of the open door down the stair. I drowsed away in noontime, and in the afternoon called again with Captain Norris, who became exceedingly interested in me. The odd incidents, so slight, yet so curious, appealed to his sense of the picturesque, and elicited from him a number of reminiscences of local ghost lore. We were genuinely perplexed at the presence of the rats, and Norris lent me some traps and Paris green, which I and the servants placed in strategic localities when I returned. I retired early, being very sleepy, but was harassed by dreams of the most horrible sort. I seemed to be looking down from an immense height upon a twilit grotto, knee-deep with filth, where a white-bearded demon swineherd drove above with a staff and a flock of fungos, flabby beasts whose appearance filled me with unutterable loathing. Then, as the swineherd paused and nodded over his task, a mighty swarm of rats rained down on the stinking abyss and fell to the devouring beasts, man and alike. From this terrific vision, I was abruptly awakened to the motions of Mr. Man, who had been sleeping in his usual. This time I did not have to question the source of his snarls and of the fear which made him sink his claws into my ankle, unconscious of their effect. For on every side of the chamber walls were alive the nauseous sound, the verminious slithering of ravenous gravity. There was now no aurora to shew the state of the auras, the fallen section of which had been replaced, but I was not too frightened to switch on the light. As the bulbs leapt into radiance, I saw a hideous shaking over the tapestry, causing the somewhat peculiar designs to exude a singular dance of death. This motion disappeared almost at once, and the sound with it. Springing out of bed, I poked at the arrows with the long handle of the warming pan that rested near, and lifted one section to see what lay beneath. There was nothing but the patched stone wall, and even the cat had lost the tense realization of the abnormal appearances. When I exclaimed the circular trap had been placed in the room, I found all of the openings strung, but no trace remained of what had been caught, and had so escaped. Further sleep was out of the question, so, lighting a candle, I opened the door and went out in the gallery towards the stairs to Mr. Man following at my heels. Before we reached the stone steps, however, the cat darted ahead of me and vanished down the ancient. Thank you, Christian. Have a wonderful rest. Thank you indeed for the headpats, and I hope you rest well, my friend. Stopping by, I appreciate it. As I descended the stairs myself, I became suddenly aware of the sounds in the great room below, the sounds of a nature which could not be mistaken. The oak-panelled walls were alive with rats, scampering and milling, and while Mr. Man was racing about with the fury of a baffled hunter, reaching the bottom, I switched on the light, which did not cause this time the noise to subside. The rats continued their stampeding with such force and distinctiveness that I could finally assign their motions to a definite direction. These creatures, in numbers apparently inexhaustible, would engage in one stupendous migration from the inconceivable heights to some death conceivably, or inconceivably. I now heard steps in the corridor, and in another moment or two servants pushed open the massive door. They were searching the house for some unknown source of disturbance, that had thrown all of the cats into a snarling panic and caused them to plunge precipitately down several flights of stairs, the squat yowling before the closed door to the sub-cellar. I had asked them if they had heard the rats, but they replied in the negative. And when I turned to call their attention to the sounds of the panels, I realized that the noise had once more ceased. With the two men, I went down to the door of the sub-cellar, but found the cats already dispersed. Later, I resolved to explore the crypt below, but for the present I merely found a round. All was sprung, yet all were tenantless. Satisfying myself that no one had heard the rats save the felines and me, I sat in my study till morning, thinking profoundly, and recalling every scrap of legend I had unearthed concerning the building I now inhabited. I slept for some in the forenoon, leaning back in one of the comfortable library chairs, which my medieval plan of the furnishing could not banish. Later I telephoned to Captain Norris, who came over and helped me to explore the sub-cellar, and absolutely nothing untoward. Even though we could not and would not repress a thrill at the knowledge that this vault was built by Roman hands. Every low arch and massive pillar was Roman. Not the debased Romanesque of the bungling Saxons, but the severe and harmonious classicism of the age of the Caesars. Indeed, the walls abound with inscriptions familiar to the antiquarians who had repeatedly things like P. Gigete, Proptem, Dona, and El Praec vers Pontifi, teeth. The reference to Attis made me shiver, for I had read Catullus and knew something of the hideous rites of the whose worship was so mixed with that of the Cybele. Norris and I, by the light of the lanterns, tried to interpret the odd, nearly affected designs of certain irregularity. Rectangular blocks of stone generally held to be altars, but would make nothing of them. Remembered that one pattern, sort of rayed sun, was held by students to imply a non-Roman origin, suggesting that these altars had merely been adopted by the Roman priest order and perhaps aboriginal temples. One of these blocks was some brown stains which made me wonder. The largest, in the centre of the room, had certain features of which the upper surface, which indicated its connection with fire, probably burned. Such were the sights in the crypt before the door who the cats had howled, and where Norris and I now determined to pass the night. The couches were brought down by the servants, who were told not to mind any nocturnal actions of the cat, and Mr. Man was admitted as much of a help as a We decided to keep the great oak door, a modern replica with little ventilation, tightly closed, and with this attended to, we retired with lanterns still burning to await whatever might occur. Hello, Eternal. Welcome. I hope you're doing well. And comedy fan. It's beautiful to have. Rats. Rubber rats. Hello, Blue Parry. Lovely to see you as well. Thank you. And Scoot. Hello, hello. Everybody dropping by. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for being here. It's so cold in here. No, thank you. Silly Billies, you don't need to thank me. Especially with my frog voice. The vault was very deep in the foundations of the priory, and undoubtedly far down on the face of the beetling limestone cliff overlooking the waste valley. That it had been the goal of the scuffling and unexplainable rats I could not doubt, though why I could not tell. As we lay there expectantly, I found my vigil occasionally mixed with half-formed dreams, from which the uneasy motions of the cat roused me. These dreams were not wholesome, but horribly like the one I had the night before. I saw again the twilight grotto, the swineherd and the unmentionable fungus beasts and filth, and I looked at these things, and they seemed nearer and more distinct. So distinct that I could almost observe their features. Then I did observe the flabby features of not one of them, and awakened with such a scream that Mr. Mann stared up, while Captain Norris, who had not slept, laughed. Norris might have laughed more, or perhaps less, had he known what it was. But I did not remember myself until later. The ultimate horror often paralyzes memory in a most merciful. Nothing like a VTuber to finally get me to read some Lovecraft. I hope you're enjoying the company. I hope you're enjoying the book. They are quite difficult reads, especially, if you're not massive in on reading to begin with. A lot of the phrasing, the words, and even the pacing can be, oof. Listening to your voice is keeping me weirdly focused. Thank you. No, I'm glad to hear that. You're most welcome. Say to people, whatever these streams bring them, if it focus, comfort, sleep, anything, company even, Just love being able to be here with you guys. And I get to reread Lovecraft myself, because it's been quite a long time. Norris waked me when the phenomena began, out of the same frightful dream I was called by his gentle shaking, and his urging to listen to the cat. Indeed, there was much to listen to, for beyond the closed door at the head of the stone steps there was a veritable nightmare of feline yelling and clawing, while Mr. Mann, unmindful of his kindred outside, was running excitedly around the bare stone walls, in which I heard the same babble of scurrying rats that had troubled me the night before. An acute terror now rose within me, for here were anomalies which nothing normal could well explain. These rats, if not the creatures of madness which I had shared with the cats alone, must be burrowing and sliding in Roman walls. I had thought it to be solid limestone blocks, unless perhaps the action of water through more than 17 centuries had eaten winding tunnels which rodent bodies have worn clear and ample. Even so, the spectral horror was no less. But if these were living vermin, why did Norris not hear their disgusting commotion? Why did he urge me to watch Mr. Mann and listen to the cats outside? And why did he guess wildly and vaguely at the rouse? By the time I had managed to tell him, as rationally as I could, what I thought I was hearing, my ears gave me the fading impression of the scurry that retreated, still downward, far underneath the deepest of subcellars. It at least seemed that the whole cliff below was riddled with questing. Norris was not as skeptical as I anticipated, but instead seemed profoundly moved. He motioned to me to notice that the cats at the door had ceased their clamour, as if giving up the rats of lost, while Mr. Mann had a burst of renewed restlessness, and was clawing frantically around the bottom of the large stone altar in the centre of the room, nearer Norris's cat than mine. My fear of the unknown was at this point very great. Something astounding had occurred, and I saw that Captain Norris, a younger, stouter, and presumably more naturally materialistic man, was affected fully as much as myself, perhaps because of his lifelong and intimate familiarity with legend. We could, for the moment, do nothing but watch the old black cat as he pawed with decreasing fervour at the base of the altar, occasionally looking up and mewing to me in a persuasive manner, which he used when he wished for me to perform some favour. Norris now took a lantern close to the altar and examined the place where Mr. Mann was pouring, silently kneeling and scraping away the lichens that joined the massive Roman block to the insulated floor. He did not find anything, and was about to abandon his effort when I noticed a trivial circumstance which made me shudder, even though it implied nothing more than what I'd already imagined. I told him of it. We both looked at it as almost imperceptible manifestation with the fixedness of fascinated discovery. It was only this that the flame of the lantern set down near the altar was slightly, but certainly flickering, were draught, which had not before been received, and which came indubitably from the crevice between the floor and altar where Norris was scraping away. We spent the rest of the night in the brilliantly lighted study, nervously discussing what we should do next. The discovery that some vault deeper than the deepest known masonry of the Romans underlay the Cathedral, and that some vault unsuspected by the curious antiquarians of 3 centuries would have been sufficient to excite us about any background of the sinister. And as it was, the fascination became twofold, and we paused in doubt whether to abandon our search and quit the priory forever in supernatural caution. To gratify our sense of adventure, and brave whatever horrors might await us, unknown depth. By morning, we had compromised, and decided to go to London to gather a group of archaeologists and scientific men fit to cope with the mystery. It should be mentioned that before leaving the sub-cellar, we had vainly tried to move the central, which we now recognized as a gate to the new pit, the nameless fate. Secret would open to the gate. Wiser men than we have to find. During many days in London, Captain Norris and I presented our facts, conjectures, and legendary anecdotes to 5 eminent authorities, all men who could be trusted to respect any family disclosures which future explorations developed. We found most of them a little disposed to scoff, but instead intensely interested and sincerely sympathetic. It is hardly necessary to name them all, but I might say that they included Sir William Brinton, whose excavations in the Trode excited most of the world to their day. And as we took the train to Manchester, I felt myself poised on the brink of the frightful revelations, a sensation symbolized by the air of mourning among the many Americans, that unexpected death for the President on the other side of the world. On the evening of August 7th, we reached Exham Priory, where the servants assured me that nothing unusual had occurred. The cats, even old Mr. Man, had been perfectly placid, and not a trap in their house had been sprung. We were to begin exploring the following day, awaiting well-assigned, well-appointed rooms to all my guests. I myself retired in my own tower chamber, with Mr. Man across. Sleep came quickly, but hideous dreams assailed me. There was a vision of a Roman feast like that of Trimalchio, with a horror in a covered platter. Then came that damnable, recurrent thing about the swineherd and filthy drove. Yet, when I had awoke, it was full daylight, with normal sounds in the house below. The rats, living or spectral, had not troubled me, and Mr. Man was quietly asleep. Yes, Mr. Man is a cat. His original name is something I cannot say, and will not say. But if you are interested, you can obviously research it yourself. Mr. Man is not the cat's name. It is something else, but we shall not read that. Yes, it's the one you're thinking of. If you've heard of Lovecraft, it is that one. Also, Broly, it's lovely to have you here. Doing yourself. Yes, it's that cat. It's that cat, Lampy. Also, hello. Yes, no, it is fully written into the story. It is that word, man. That is the name of the cat. That word, man. As it is obviously written of his time, it is a word he does use a lot in his work. An awful lot. Yes, as Femboy Misa was mentioning earlier, a lot of his work does unfortunately cover some themes which we no longer, as I said before, would agree with. But that being written of its time, it's important to remember that, those things unfortunately did happen and those views were there. As I said, I called it the Disney disclaimer to stories. You'd have to remember that these were written when they were written. And, yeah. Be like that. History happened, though. Can't ignore history. DC Sensei, thank you for dropping by. As always, for the beautiful message. Honestly, it warms my little heart whenever you send that. So much, and all the same to you. Glad you like the chill vibes. Like I said, these reading streams, we don't do nearly as often as we should, but I'm planning to do them perhaps every Thursday now. If people continue to like them, it's just a nice change of pace. I know a lot of people like to listen to the VODs. So it's just nice to have that slow pace for a change, And I enjoy you being here. Like I said, thank you ever so much to everyone who's in. Whether you're here now or here later, or whenever, I appreciate you. Me and Mr. Man were quietly asleep. On going down, I found that the same tranquility had prevailed elsewhere, a condition which one of the assembled savants, a fellow named Thornton, devoted to the psychic, rather absurdly laid to me the fact that I had now been shrewd to think certain forces shrew me. All was now ready, and at 11 a.m. our entire group of 7 men bearing powerful electric searchlights and implements of excavation went down to the subcellar and bolted the door behind us. Mr. Man was with us, but the investigators found no occasion to despise his excitability, and were indeed anxious that he had been present in the case of the obscure rodent manifestations. We noted the Roman inscriptions and the unknown author designs only briefly, but 3 of the savants had already seen them and knew all of their characters. Prime attention was paid to the momentous central, and within an hour Sir William Brinton had caused it to tilt backwards, balanced by some unknown species of counterweight. There now lay revealed such a horror as would have overwhelmed us had we not been prepared. Through a nearly square opening in the tower floor, sprawling on a flight of stone steps so prodigiously worn that it was little more than an inclined plane at the centre, was a ghastly array of human semi-bones. Those which retained their collocation as skeletons, shrewd attitudes of panic and fear, and all over were the marks of rodent snoring. The skull denoted nothing short of utter idiocy, centrism, or primitive semi-apedom. And apart from the hellishly littered steps arched a descending passage seemingly chiselled from solid rock, and conducting a current of air. This current was not a sudden and noxious rush as from a closed vault, but a cool breeze with something of freshness. We did not pause long, but shiveringly began to clear a passage down the steps. It was then that Sir William, examining the hewn walls, made the odd observation that the path, according to the direction of the strokes, must have been chiselled from beneath. Sip. I must be very deliberate now, and choose my words. After clapping down a few steps amidst the gnawed bones, we saw that it was light ahead, and not a mystic phosphorescence, but a filtered daylight which could not come except from unknown fissures in the cliff that overlooked the waste valley. Such fissures had escaped notice from outside was hardly remarkable, for not only is the valley wholly uninhabited, but the cliff is so high and belittling that only an aeronaut could study its face in detail. A few steps more, and our breaths were literally snatched from us by what we saw, so literally that Thornton, the psychic investigator, actually fainted in the arms of the dazed man who stood behind him. Norris, his face utterly white and flabby, simply cried out inarticulately, while I think what I did was to grasp hiss and cover my eyes. The man behind me, the only one particularly older than I, croaked in the hackened, "My God!" in the most cracked voice I had ever heard. Of the 7 cultivated men, only Sir William Brinton retained his composure, a thing more to his credit because he led the party, and must have seen the side of it. It was a twilight grotto of enormous height, stretching away farther than any eye could see, a subterraneous world of limitless mystery, horrible suggestion. There were buildings and other architectural remains, and in one terrified glance I saw a weird pattern of tumuli, a savage circle of monoliths, a low domed Roman ruin, a sprawling Saxon pile, and an early English edifice. But all of these were dwarfed by ghoulish spectacles blended with the general surface of them. For yards about the steps extended an insane tangle of human bones, or bones at least as human as like a foamy sea they stretched, some fallen apart, but others wholly or partially articulated skeletons. These latter invariably in postures or demonic frenzy, either fighting off some menace or clutching other forms of cannibal intent. When Dr. Task, the anthropologist who classified the skulls, he found that a degraded mixture which utterly baffled him. They were mostly lower than the Piltdown man's scale of evolution, but in any case, definitely. Many were of higher grade, and a very few of the skulls are supremely and sensitively defiant. All the bones were gnawed, mostly by rats, but somewhat by others of the half-human trope. Mixed with them were, indeed, many tiny bones, fallen members of the lethal army, those ancient. I wonder that any human man amongst us lived and kept his sanity through that hideous day of discovery. Not Hoffman or Huysmans conceive a scene more wildly incredible and more frantically repellent, more gothically grotesque than the twilight grotto through which we 7 staggered, each stumbling on the revelation after it, and trying to keep with the nuance of thinking that the events which must have taken their 300 years, or 1,000, 2,000, or 10,000 years ago. It was the same antechamber of hell, and poor Thornton fainted again when Trask told him that other skeleton things must have descended as quadrupeds through the last 20 or more generations. A happy belated New Year to you, Shorshu. Thank you for stopping by. Thank you so much. I hope you had a wonderful holiday period. Always a pleasure to see you. So what I've learned from this story so far is don't explore ancient Roman ruins underneath an old Gothic castle. Got it? And a highlight to you, Nyla. Horror piled on horror as I began to interpret the architectural remains. The quadruped things of their occasional recruits from the biped class had been kept in stone pens, out of which they must have broken in their last delirium of hunger or rat fit. There had been great herds of them, evidently fattened with the coarse vegetables. Remains would be found a sort of poisonous ensilage at the bottom of the huge stone bins, older than the road. I knew now why my ancestors had had such an excessive gardens. To heaven I could forget. The purpose of the herds I did not. Sir William, standing with a searchlight in the Roman ruin, translated aloud the most shocking ritual I have ever known, and told of the diet of the antediluvian cult proceeds that Sibley found and mingled with their own. Norris, used as he was to the trenches, could not walk straight when he came out of the English building. It was a butcher shop and kitchen. He'd expected that, but it was too much to see familiar English implements and to read familiar English graffiti there, some as recent. I could not go in that building whose demon activities were stopped only by the dagger of my ancestor, Paulson de la Poer. What I did venture to enter was the low Saxon building whose oaken door had fallen, and there I found a terrible row of 10 stone stalls with rusty bars. The 3 had tenants, all skeletons of a high grade, and on the bony forefinger of one I found a ring sealed with my own coat of arms. Sir William found a vault with far older cells below the Roman chapel, but these cells were empty. And even below them was a low crypt, with cases of formally arranged bones, some of them bearing terrible parallels in Latin, Greek, and the tongue of Phrygia. Meanwhile, Dr. Trask had opened one of the prehistoric tumuli and brought to light skulls which were slightly more human than a gorilla's, and which bore indescribable ideographic carving. Through this and horror, my cat stalked unperturbed. Once I saw him monstrably perched on a mountain of bones, and wondered if the secret might lie behind his. Having grasped to some slight degree the frightful revelations of this twilight area, an area so hideously foreshadowed by a recurrent dream, we turned to that apparently boundless depth of Midnight Cavern where no ray of light from the cliff could penetrate. We shall never know what secret, slightless Stygian worlds yawn beyond the distance we went, but it was decided that such secrets are not good for me. But there was plenty to engross us at close hand. We had not gone far before the searchlight shrewd that accursed infinity of pits in which the rats and whose sudden lack of replenishment had driven the ravenous rodent army first to turn on the living herds of starving things, and then to burst forth from the priory in the historic orgy of devastation which peasants will never. Gosh, those carrion black pits of sawywood, picked bones and opened skulls. Those nightmare chasms choked with the pyth Celtic, Roman, and English bones of countless unhallowed centuries. Some of them were full, and none can say how deep they'd once been. Others were still bottomless to our searchlights, and people unnameable fancies. What, I thought, of the hapless rats that stumbled into such traps and missed the blackness of their quest this grisly Tartarus? Once my foot slipped near a horribly yawning brink, I had a moment of ecstatic fear. I must have been musing a long time, for I could not see any of the party but the plump Captain Norris. Then there came a sound from that inky, boundless, farther distance than I thought I knew. I saw my old black cat dart past me like the winged Egyptian god, straight into the inimitable gulf of the unknown. But I was not far behind. For there was no doubt another second it was the eldritch scurrying of those fiend bulls, always questing new horrors, and determined to lead me onto even those grinning caverns of Earth's center, when the laugh attack, the mad, faceless howls blindly into the piping of the two amorphous idiot flute players. My searchlight had expired, but still, I ran. I heard voices, yowls, and echoes, but above all, there gently rode that impatient, insidious scurrying, gently rising, as stiff as a bloated corpse gently rises above an oily river that flows under the endless onyx bridges to the black, putrid sea. Something bumped into me. Something soft and plump. Must have been the rats. The vicious, gelatinous, ravenous army that feast on the dead and the living. Why shouldn't rats eat de la porc, as a de la porc eats forbidden things? War ate my boy. Damn them all. And the Yanks ate Carfax with the flames and burned grandsire and de la porc the secret. No, I tell you, I am not that demon. I am not the demon swineherd in the twilight grotto. It was not Edward Norris's fat face on that flabby fungus. Says I am a de la porc. He lived, but my boy died. Shall Norris hold the lands of de la porc? It's voodoo, I tell you. That spotted snake. Curse you, Thornton. I'll teach you to faint at what my family do. Blood, thou stinkard. I'll learn ye how to gust. Would ye swank me like this? Magna matter. Magramata. Diar agt aharis. Ad orman. Agus bas dandacht ort. Daras. Ort agas litsa. Unkt. That is what they say. I said when they found me in the blackness after 3 hours. Found me crouching in the blackness over the plump, half-eaten body of Captain Norris, with my own cat leaping and tearing at my own throat. Now they have blown up Exham Priory, taken my Mr. Man away from me, and shut me into this barred room at Handwell with fearful whispers about my hereditary and experiences. Thornton is in the next room, but they prevent me from talking. They are trying to suppress the most facts concerning the Priory. When I speak of poor Norris, they accuse me of a hideous thing. But they must know that I did not do it. They must know that it was the rats. The slithering, scurrying rats whose scampering would never let me sleep. The demon rats that race behind the padding in this room and beckon me down to the greater horror that I have ever known. The rats they can never hit. The rats. The rats and the wolves. There we have it. The Rats in the Wolves by H.P. Lovecraft. Read by yours truly, the Morbid Moth. Apologies again if I, especially in that last segment, I'm not very good at reading Cthulhu words. I can't say the great Dark One has given me much knowledge in terms of pronunciation, but hey-ho. I'm going to draw my curtains because my neighbours keep staring in and I don't like it. Stop being nosy. Go away. Mind your own business. Oh, is that a big stretch? So long story short, don't buy an old house with a possible demon altar at the bottom, and don't listen to the voices that tell you to, you know, go around and possibly kill your friends, which may or may not have been rats, maybe add. Like they've never seen a moth reading Lovecraft. Oh, and do not, yes, remember, do not do that. Thank you for the hydrate and the posture check. Yes, make sure to stretch. I hope you're drinking enough for today. Even if it's just a little sip, your body needs it. It's amazing at how you think you can read for quite a long time, which you can, but how your mouth, I don't know about you, but my mouth starts to betray me. It's like, I know you've been speaking. It's weird because I can stream for hours and it's fine, but reading something specific, I don't know. It really like gets to you at the end. That was good. I can see why that's a top-rated one. I can definitely see why that's a top-rated story. I have to say, I'm certainly more fond. I like the Reanimator. That was a good one. But I like the build-up to this one. I think that's one thing a lot of people don't realise Lovecraft does very well. Is setting the scene and having all of that kind of backstory lead up to something and the interconnections between them. Oh, Eugene Krabs, my lovely, this is him being polite. At least in this sense, he's actually talking about a cat. There's other novels of his and other readings we've done here have been very difficult. Especially when he's describing certain people and you're just like, oh, I don't know how I'm going to do this one. So we are slowly making our way through all the Lovecraft novels. We also do a bit of Edgar Allan Poe from time to time. They're good ones. It's trying to find the right balance, because some of them obviously are incredibly long. And I don't mean to, but you know when you sort of phase out when you're reading something like that, because I'm aware of how I'm pronouncing it for you, and making sure that you guys can hear me well and all sorts. But I know the next one, regardless of my rambling, the next one we had in mind was the Whisper in the Darkness. We said we'd do kind of the top. The Whisper in Darkness is much longer than this one, though. And it's similar to things like Call of Cthulhu. Like, I'm not sure how many people actually want to listen to it. Well, essentially a novel. It would definitely be multi-stream or such. It is Malice, yes. What an important... Oh, yeah, basically. My favourite is Through the Gates of the Silver Key. I can't remember that one. I'll be honest with you. Because I have a like an Necronomicon that's got all of his stories in it. I read them a long time ago. And I remember the odd thing. But they do tend to kind of merge into one, I'm not going to lie. Especially his shorter stories, which some of them are fantastic. They're incredibly looked over. His poems are quite good as well. Yeah, I quite like a bit of poetry, but I know people aren't exactly all about that. It's also more fun to read poetry yourself, I think, rather than have it read to you. The Dream Saga, the Randolph Card. Oh, yes. Oh, the Dream Saga. Oh my gosh. The Dream Saga is one you have to really concentrate on. It's like, what is happening? Thank you. I do hope you enjoyed that. Well, I tell you what, the thing on the doorstep was what I was thinking about doing next, actually. I've got a couple lined up. The ones I currently have lined up are, so in general reading terms, this is what I currently have lined up. So I have The Whisper in the Darkness, The Thing on the Doorstep, The Dunwich Horror, At the Mountains of Madness, The Call of Cthulhu, 25 Ghost Stories by Bob Holland, and The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. But again, they're more kind of like long novel-y ones. Not sure if anyone would want me to read The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, but The Thing on the Doorstep's quite a good one. I mean, I could... not overly long, actually, either. Again, about Lovecraft, it's very much to your own taste. You know, there's no one definitive, this is the best. Everyone's got their own take on what they find is the best. Like, listen to you read every book in the English lexicon. I don't think I would do it too much justice. The Colorado... see, I've not actually watched the film. We have read it on stream, though. We did read that one on stream. Welcome, Bida-san. Lovely to have you. Thank you so much for the follow. I hope you're doing well. I know as well there's quite a few Reddit stories. We actually began this reading by reading the Stairs in the Woods series on Reddit, which are incredibly good. Highly recommend. But there's a very grey line when it comes to reading Reddit. Some people say fine reading. Some people say you can't read them because, you know, there's it's very unclear where the copyright line stands, and the same with creepypastas as well. If you look actually at a lot of the creepypastas that have been written, they actually say please do not reread or use, etc. So unless you have explicit permission, which I, you know, sadly do not get because I'm not anyone important, shall we say, you can't actually read a lot of the creepypastas out loud. Which is a shame. It's a shame, really. But it makes sense because they are, you know, they are someone's work. Well, I tell you what. Let me change the title. We'll do The Thing on the Doorstep, because that one's not massively long. I've got that one up in front. And we'll do this one as well. The Mountains of Madness game is called The Edge of Night. I mean, I know Mountains of Madness, but again, that's a very long one. That might have to be a multi-stream one. Like I said, as much as I love these reading, they do take a lot out of you for some reason. Not entirely sure why. But no, we'll continue reading. We'll continue reading. We're not done yet. My voice might be a bit cruddy, but we'll see how we go. Yes, H.P. Lovecraft, all of that is public domain, as is Edgar Allan Poe. I was looking up more public domain. There's actually an archive. They can search up anything public domain. I know Winnie the Pooh, public domain. I mean, I'm happy to read Winnie the Pooh. It's certainly better than making a bad horror movie about it, wouldn't it? Hello, Destra, welcome. Thank you for being here. But yeah, you can research what has recently been made public domain, hence why everyone's like, oh, mouse and all of that. So most of the time, if you look up a book, you can tell if it's public domain. The Wizard of Oz, for example, Dracula, Frankenstein. Frankenstein's another one I want to read. I love Frankenstein. But again, I know it's a very long one, so that would have to be through multiple. But yeah, Frankenstein and Modern Prometheus. The Woman in Black. That's another one I want to read, but I don't know if it's public domain. That's another good story. It does strain the eyes. Oh yes, it does. It's annoying because I feel like if I had them as actual books in front of me, it'd be a lot easier. Yeah, reading it on the screen, it's like be nice to my eyeballs. Even with all sorts of reading filters. But yes, but if there's anything that's on public domain that you've like read or such, I'm always open to suggestions. Obviously, it might be a while until we get around to them. Quite a few we're trying to get through. The King in Yellow. It is. The United States. Does that mean I can not read? I don't know. Does that mean I can read it? Oh, yeah. It's. It very specifically says in. Sure, it'd be fine, surely. I don't see why not. Right. The thing on the doorstep is about the same length as the one we just read. I'll get through as much as I can. We should be able to finish it. I might have like a break in between. And actually, no, I'm going to have a very quick break now. I'm just going to get myself another drink, have a stretch. I'll be back in a moment. It's all right with you. We're going to go into the thing on the doorstep. I'll be back in just a moment. Go have a stretch. Go hydrate. Get some snacks. Do whatever it is you need to do. And I'll be back for part 2 after the break.
A coop of shame! I told you the chicken people are after me! The chicken people! What did I tell you? Told you! I used to live in a Latino neighborhood that had a lot of Spanish-sounding names for food. Oh, that sounds nice though. I bet the food was delicious.
Right, that clip player gave me a heart attack as well. I'm so sorry. Okay, yeah, back in a second.
More tentacles. Come on then, mate. Come on then. Come at me. Come at me. I've seen hentai. I know how to deal with you. Good old shotgun to the face. Oh lord. Oh lord.
Frost your Ochi.
Ah.
And finally, I come to you, Nicolas Cage. The skills you had demonstrated in gunfights, self-defense against robots, and stealing the Declaration of Independence is exactly what we need. Will you help us acquire the treasured Muthy body?
No! Stop it!
Steal the Declaration of Independence? A walk in the park. But this Muthy body pillow caper, it sings to my soul like a siren to a sailor. I say we storm the gates, out with the robots, and make history with a heist that puts national treasure to shame. Consider my treasure hunting, robot fighting, adrenaline-fueled enthusiasm.
My
at your
gosh,
service.
she's not
Let's
stopping!
ride into the maelstrom and emerge with the pillow in hand.
Frosty!
And now, I picture you quoting Mary Poppins in League of Extraordinary. Rocked baby gots to sleep, drank tea. I've been protecting everyone. And I know what bees know, and I've been every garden. You, truly.
No, I know, you blow the inside of the hole. No. Everyone, listen to this voice.
Ready?
Did you just plug me in my own stream?
I need them. Why is there another one?
I'm gonna get you. I'm gonna get you. I'm gonna get you. I got. Whee! Ooh, bouncy. Ooh. Oh, fine. I'm not touching the vroom vroom at this height.
Yeah, probably not recommended.
You're so high up.
I'm not touching the shock grenade. You know how that looks. What was
the heck?
you could?
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, someone asked for arson.
That.
Hello, Rory. How are you? For those that have just come in, again, this is Seeker TV. They did an any percent speed run in 16:43 on Ultra Nightmare. I've completed it, but I'm going to be uploading all of it to YouTube, so do not worry.
Oh, you don't want to hear us bark? Well, that's too bad. Bark, bark, bark.
Wesker, please! Wesker, please! Not in my Moffy mansion. He just died. Good, then my job is done. Your points have been worth it. My heart is melting. How can I bug you, Moth? You're already a bug. Your info says to bug you. Exactly. Come bug the bug. Always welcome to bug the bug. And Lumpy, we're doing very well, thank you. How are you doing? Woken up super late? That's fine. It's a Friday. Fight pit? We can do a fight pit. And do we want me in there? Or am I just going to be the humble narrator? Why do these Sims look so cute? Hello, my name. For a succubus that can't suck. That was some good sucking sounds right there. Oh no, it's the stinky poopy. Whoa, whoa, whoa. We don't need to see. Whoa, excuse me. Well, that was traumatic.
No, oh, no. Oh, that was two. Who else? Oh, no, no. Come on, pages.
Yeah, I can tank them. Ah! You bastard! So that didn't just happen. Right, we didn't see that. Angry moth noises. Grr. Grr.
Oh, what do you want?
Grr. Grr. Hello, John Tier. Thank you for the follow. I'm back, everyone. Hello, I have a dream. I also have... They're really scratched, though. I need a new pair. Like, really badly. I left them on the my bed, and my dog decided she wanted to have really scratched. I also used to take them to work all the time. But hello, how are you? Alice, so much. So sweet of you. And Shepherd, what have you left me? I hope it's... I'm joking, you're lovely. I know you're lovely. You. Like I said, apologies if I don't see any notifications and such. They are muted. Just because you know we're relaxed. Let me have a look at what Shepherd's just sent. So good. Oh, it's lovely. Thank you. I kind of want to cut my hair short as well. I'm gonna lie, me and Bob kind of rocking it. Shepherd, I'm artists being good at drawing. How dare you? Right. Now then, where were we? So, you're gonna be all flustered. Chatty, you're very good at that, you know. Not that I'll ever admit it. Just because I said it doesn't mean it's true. The next story we are reading today is called The Thing on the Doorstep. It is also by H.P. Lovecraft. Woohoo, public domain. And apparently people like it when I read Lovecraft. Again, I would just like to state, as I've stated before, please remember this is a work of its time. There will be words, there will be descriptions, there will be mentions that may not be reflected in today's views. Please be remember, this is written, you know, when it was written. Keep that in mind. There will be words that I will have no idea how to pronounce. I will try my best. I will stumble. I will stutter. I will lose my place. I am but a moth after all. Just a relaxed read. Nothing official. Although, if anybody wants me to voice act, please let me know, because I would love to. I'm joking, kind of. Hook me up. No, seriously, this is all just, like I said, a nice, relaxed environment. For everyone just to vibe in. Also, there will be background noise because I can't help. The Thing on the Doorstep by H.P. Lovecraft. It is true that I have sent 6 bullets through the head of my best friend, and yet I hope to shew this by the statement that I am not a murderer. At first I should be called a madman, madder than the men I had shot in his cell at the Arkham Sanitarium. Later, some of my readers will weigh each statement I correlated with known facts and ask themselves how I could have believed otherwise than I did after facing the evidence of that horror, that thing on the doorstep. Until then, I also saw nothing but the madness in the wild tales I've acted on. Even now I ask myself whether I was misled, or whether I am not mad at all. I do not know, but others have strange things to tell of Edward and Asif Derby. Even the stolid police are at their wits' ends to account for the terrible last visit. They have tried weakly to concoct a theory of ghastly jest or warning by discharged servants, yet they know in their hearts that the truth is something infinitely more terrible and incredible. So I say that I have not murdered Edward Derby. Rather, I have avenged him, and in doing so have purged the earth of a horror whose survival might have loosened untold terrors on all mankind. There are black zones of shadow close to our daily paths, and now then some evil soul breaks a passage through. When that happens, the man who knows must strike before the reckoning of the consequences. I have known Edward Pickman Derby all his life. 8 years my junior, he was so precious that we had much in common from the time he was 8 and I 16. He was the most phenomenal child scholar I'd ever known, and at 7 was writing a verse of sombre, fantastic, almost morbid cast which astonished the tutors surrounding him. Perhaps his private education and coral seclusion has something to do with premature flowering. And, as an only child, he had an organic weakness which started in his doting parents that caused them to keep him closely chained to their side. He was never allowed out with his nurse, and seldom had a chance to play unconstrainedly with other children. All of this doubtness fostered a strange, secretive inner life in the boy, with imagination as his one avenue. At any rate, his juvenile learning was prodigious and bizarre, and his facile writings as to what captivated me greater than anyone my age. About that time, I had leanings toward an art of somewhat grotesque cast, and I found in this younger child a rare kindred spirit. What lay behind our joint love for shadows and marvels was no doubt mouldering, subtly fearsome town in which we lived. Witch-cursed, a legend-haunted Arkham. Huddled, sagging, gambrel, crumbling Georgian bullshit brewed the centuries inside the darkling Catonic. As time went by, I turned to architecture and gave up my design of illustrating demonic poems, and yet of our comradeship suffered no less. Young Derby's odd genius developed remarkably, and in his 18th year his collected nightmare lyrics made a real sensation when issued under the title of Azoth and Other Horrors. He was a close correspondent of the notorious Borderian poet Justin Joffrey, who wrote The People of the Monolith, and died screaming in a madhouse in 1926 after a visit to a sinister, guarded village in Hungary. In self-reliance and practical affairs, however, Derby was greatly stupid because of his coddled existence. His health had improved, but habits of childish dependence were far overkept, so that he never travelled alone, made independent decisions, or assumed responsibilities. It was early seen that he would not be equal to a struggle in the business professional area, but the family fortune was so ample that it formed no tragedy. As he grew of years of manhood, he retained the deceptive aspect of boyishness. Blonde and blue-eyed, he had the fresh complexion of a child, and his attempts to raise a moustache were discernible only with difficulty. His voice was soft and light and pampered. Unexercised life gave him a juvenile chubbiness rather than the paunchiness of mature middle age. He was of good height, and his handsome face would have made him a notable gallant lad had not his shyness held him in seclusion. Derby's parents took him abroad in summer, and he was quick to seize on the surface aspects of European thought and experience. His Poe-like talents had turned more and more to and other artistic sensibilities. His yearnings were half aroused in him. We had great discussions in those days. I had been through Harvard and studied in a Boston office, had married, and finally returned to Arkham to practice my profession, settling in the family homestead, Sellenstall, since my father had moved to Florida. Edward used to call almost every evening, till I came to regard him as one of the household. He had a characteristic way of ringing the doorbell, or sounding the knocker that grew to be a veritable code signal, so that after dinner I always listened to the familiar 3 brisk strokes, followed by 2 more, and a pause. Less frequently I would visit at his house, and note with envy the obscure volumes in his constantly. Derby went through the Miskatonic University in Arkham, since his parents would not let him board away from them. He entered at 16 and completed its course in 3 years, majoring in English and French literature, receiving high marks in everything but mathematics and sciences. He mingled very little with the other students, though looking enviously daring or bohemian set whose sufficiently smart language means the ironic pose he and whose dubious conduct he wished dare to adopt. What he did do was become an almost fanatical devotee of the subterranean magical lore, and for which Mr. Cotonic's library was, and is, famous. Always a dweller on the surface of fantasy and strangeness, he now delved deep into the actual runes and riddles left by a fabulous past with posterity. He read things like the frightful Book of Evian and the Unrauschenkuleten of von Junst. Apologies, or whatever language that was, I do apologize. And the forbidden Necronomicon of the mad Arab Abdul Asherah, though he did not tell his parents he'd seen them. Ed was 20, son and only child, and seemed pleased when I named the newcomer Edward Derby Upton after him. Who gets a mark in maths anyways. So simple. By the time he was 25, Edward Derby was a prodigiously learned man, and a fairly well-known poet in fantasy, though his lack of contacts and responsibilities had slowed down his literary growth by making his products of derivative and overbooking. I was perhaps his closest friend, finding him an inexhaustible mine of vital theoretical topics, while he relied on me for advice on whatever matters he wished to return. He remained single, more through shyness and inertia, and parental protectiveness than through inclination, and moved in society only to the slightest and most perfunctory extent. When the war came, both health and ingrained timidity came. I went to Plattsburgh for a commission, but never got overseas. So the years wore on. Edward's mother died when he was 34, and for months he was incapacitated by some psychological malady. His father took him to Europe. However, he managed to pull out all of his travel without visibility. Afterwards, he seemed to feel a sort of grotesque exhilaration as if of partial escape from some unseen bondage. He began to mingle in a more advanced college, said despite his middle age, and was present at his more extremely wild doings on more than one occasion, paying heavy blackmail, which he borrowed up, to keep his presence at a certain affair from his father's notice. Some of the whispered rumours about the wild and miskatonic set were extremely singular, and there was even talk of black magic and of happenings utterly... Edward, yes, thank you so much. Kindly for that. Sweet of you, you didn't have to do such a... Much. Talk. Yes, sir. Edward was 38 when he met Athens Wade. She was, I judge, about 23. And Alice. Yeah. And was taking a special course in medieval metaphysics at Mizzicotton. The daughter of a friend of mine had met her before at the Hall of School at Kingsport, and had been inclined to shun her because of her odd ring. She was dark, smallish, and very good-looking, except for her over-pretty, but something that alienated extremely sensitive. It was, however, largely her origin, and conversations caused the average folk to avoid her. She was one half of the Innsmouth Waits. The dark legends have clustered generations about the crumbling half-deserted inn. There are tales of horrible bargains by the year of 80, and of a strange element of not quite human in the ancient families of the run-down fishing port. Tales as any old time that Yankees could buy as proper orphans. Athens' case was aggravated by the fact that she was Ephraim Waite's daughter, the child of his old age by an unknown wife who always... Hello, cleric. Thank you. Bye. I hope you're well. Ephraim lived in a half-decayed mansion in Washington Street, Innsmouth, and those who've seen the place, Arkham folk avoid going to the Innsmouth can, declared that the attic windows were always boarded, and that strange sounds sometimes floated from within as the evening drew on. The old man was known to have been a prodigious magical student back then, and the legend averred that he could raise or quell storms at sea. I'd seen him once or twice in my youth as he hearkened to written tomes at the college library, and had hated his wolfish, saccharine face with its tangle of iron grey beard. He had died insane, under rather queer circumstances, just before his daughter, by his will, made Norman Ward principal at school hall. But she had been his morbidly avid pupil and looked fiendishly at him. The friend whose daughter had gone to school at the Asenath repeated many curious things when news of Edward's acquaintance with her began to spread about. Asenath, it seemed, had posed a kind of magicianess, and had really seemed to accomplish some highly baffling marvels. She professed to be able to raise thunderstorms. Through her seeming success, generally led to some uncanny knack at prediction. All animals markedly disliked her, and she could make any dog howl by a certain motion of. There were times when she displayed snatches of knowledge and language very similar and very shocking for a young girl. She would frighten her schoolmates with leers and winks of a despicable kind, and seemed to extract obscene and zestful irony from her present situation. Most unusual, though, were the well-attested cases of her influence over the other persons. She was, beyond question, a genuine hypnotist. By gazing peculiarly at a fellow student, she would often give the latter a distinct feeling of exchanged personality, as if the subject were placed momentarily in the magician's body and able to stare half across the room at her real, whose eyes blazed and protruded with alien. Thank you, Shepherd. I'll have a little hydrate. Make sure the frog doesn't come out. Thank you, thank you. Make sure you order a sippy whip. Asenath often made wild claims about the nature of consciousness and about its independence of the physical frame, or at least from the life processes of physical frame. The crowning rage, however, was that she was not a man, since she had believed that a male brain had a certain unique and far-reaching. Given a man's brain, she declared, she could not only equal but surpass her father in the mastery of unknown. Edward met Asenath at the gathering of the intelligentsia held in one of the students' rooms, and could talk of nothing else when he came to see me. He had found her full of interest and erudition which engrossed him most, and was in addition wildly taken. I had never seen the young woman, and recalled the casual references only faintly, but knew who she was. It seemed rather regrettable that Derby should become so upheaved about it, but I said nothing to discourage him, since infatuation thrives. He was not, he said, mentioning her. Fun. Hello, Whimsy. I hope you're doing well also. Thank you for the lurk. Very much appreciate it. I'll do another sippy. Thank you. For the next few weeks, I heard very little of Brother Asenath from the Long Derby. Others now remarked Edward's autumnal gallantry, though they agreed that he did not look even nearly his actual age, seem at all inappropriate for an escort of bizarre divinity. He was only a trifle paunchy despite his indolence and self-indulgence, and his face was absolutely without lines. Asenath, on the other hand, had the premature crow's feet which come from the exercise of an intense will. About at this time, Edward brought the girl to call on me, and I at once saw his interest by no means one-sided. She eyed him continually with an almost predatory air, and I perceived that their intimacy yawned on angling. Soon afterward, I had a visit from old Mr. Derby, who I had always admired and respected. He had heard the tales of his son's new friend, and had wormed the truth out of the boy. Edward meant to marry Asenath, and even had been looking at the houses in the suburbs. Knowing my usually great influence of his son, the father had wondered if I could help break the ill-advised affair. But I regretfully expressed my doubts. This time it was not a question of Edward's weak will, but of the woman's strong will. The perennial child had transferred his dependence from the parental image to a new and stronger image, and, well, nothing could be done about it. The wedding was performed a month later, by of justice and peace, according to the bride's. Mr. Derby, at my advice, offered no opposition, and he, my wife, and son ended the brief ceremony, the other guests being wild young people from college. Asenath had bought the old crown ship and to the high street, and they proposed to settle there after a short trip, when 3 servants and some books and household goods were to be bought. It was probably not so much consideration of Edward and his father as the personal wish of the library and his crowd of sophisticates that had made Asenath settle in Arkham instead of returning permanently. When Edward called on me after the honeymoon, I thought he looked slightly changed. Asenath had made him get rid of the underdeveloped moustache, but there was something more than that. He looked soberer and more thoughtful, his habitual pout of childish readiness being exchanged for a look of almost genuine sadness. I was puzzled to decide whether I liked or disliked the change. Personally, he seemed for the moment more normally adult than ever before, and perhaps their marriage was a good thing. It might not change the dependence from a start towards neutralization, leading ultimately to responsible independence. Thank you for the Arch the Oni. Very much. Hope you're having a good day or evening. Came alone, for Asenath was very busy. She had bought a vast store of books and apparatus from Innsmouth. Derby shuddered as he spoke the name, and was finishing the restoration of the Crown's Inn Shield House. Her home in that town was a rather disquieting place, but certain objects in it had told him some surprising things. It was progressing fast in stoic law, and now they had Asenath's guidance. Some of the experiments she proposed were daring and radical. He did not feel at liberty to describe them, but he had confidence in his powers and intention. The 3 servants were very queer, an incredibly aged couple who had been with the old Earthrim the referred to occasion, and Asenath's dead mother. The swarthy young wench who had marked anomalies of the feature and seemed to exude perpetual. Neither thing on the doorstep. I get locked out. Oh no. Oh, Shepherd. And a stretch, thank you. You better not be shrimping. I'm looking at you, chat. Be less of a pretzel. Chapter 3. For the next 2 years, I saw less and less of Derby. The fortnight would sometimes slip by without the familiar 3 and 2 strokes at the front door, and when he did call, or when as happened, was increasing in frequency. I called on him, and he was very little disposed to converse on vital topics. He'd become secretive about those occult studies which he used to describe and discuss so minutely, and preferred not to talk of his. He had aged tremendously since his marriage, until now, oddly enough, she seemed the elder of the 2. Her face held the most concentratedly determined expression I had ever seen, and her whole aspect seemed to gain a vague, unplaceable impulsiveness. My wife and son noticed it as much as I, and we all ceased to gradually call on her, for which Edward admitted in one of his boorishly tactful moments that she was unimaginatively grateful. Occasionally, the Derbys would go on long trips, ostensibly to Europe, though Edward sometimes hinted at obscurer. It was after the first year that people began talking about the change in Edward Derby. It was a very casual talk, for the change was purely psychological, but it brought up some interesting points. Now and then, it seemed, Edward was observed to wear an expression and do things wholly incompatible with his usual flabby nature. For example, although in the old days he could not drive a car, he was now seen to occasionally to dash into or out of the old Crownshield driveway with Athena's powerful pack, handling it like a master and meeting traffic entanglements with a skill and determination utterly alien to his unaccustomed nature. In such cases, he seemed to always just be in the back from a trip or just starting on one. What sort of trip, no one could guess, although he mostly favoured the Innsmouth. The metamorphosis did not seem altogether pleasing. People said he looked too much like his wife, or like Ephraim White himself. In his moments, or perhaps the moments seemed unnatural, they were so. Sometimes, hours after staring out of the way, he would return listlessly sprawled out on the rear seat, while an obviously hired chauffeur or mechanic. Also, his predespondent aspect in the streets during his decreasing round of social contract, including, I may say, was the old-time indecisive one. This irresponsible child more marked in the while Asenath's faced age, Edwards, aside from those exceptional occasions, actually relaxed into a kind of exaggerated immaturity, save when it traced the new sadness, understanding would. It was really rather puzzling. Meanwhile, the Derbys almost dropped out of the college circle, not through their own disgust. We heard because something about their present studies shocked even the most callous of the other descendants. It was in the third year of the marriage that Edward began to hint openly to me of a certain fear of action. He would let forward remarks about things going too far, and would talk darkly about the need of saving his identity. At first I ignored such references, but in time I began to question him guardedly, remembering what my friend's daughter had said about Asenath's hypnotic influence over the other girls at school. The cases where students had thought they were in her body, across. This questioning seems to make him at once alarmed and grateful, and once he mumbled something about having a serious. About this time, old Mr. Derby died, which I was afterward very thankful. Edward was badly upset, though by no means disorganized. He had seen astonishingly little of his parents since his marriage. Asenath had concentrated himself in all the vital sense of the family. Some called it callous and loss, especially since those jaunty and confident moods in the car began. He now wished to move back to the old Derby mansion, but Asenath insisted on staying in the Crown and Shield house, which she had well and just. Hello, Nipsu. How are you? There's no other category for just reading out loud. I'm softly reading, so I'm not entirely. I wasn't sure what category to put it at. Don't worry, I'm not molesting the microphone or anything. No worries, you take care, Nipsu. Honestly, they should have a reading category. Anyway. Hello, Seraph. How are you? Stopping by. We're just reading a bit of Lovecraft. Not long afterward, my wife heard a curious thing from a friend. One of the few had not dropped the Derbys. She had been seen out at the end of the high street, the couple, and had seen a car shoot briskly out of the drive with Edward's oddly confident and almost sneering face above it. Ringing the bell, she had been told by the repulsive wench that Asenath, was also out, but had a chance to look up at the house and leave. There, at one of Edward's library windows, she glimpsed a hastily withdrawn face whose expression of pain, defeat, and wistful hopelessness was poignant beyond description. It was incredibly enough in view of his usual demurring cast, Athena. Yet the caller had avowed that in an instant the sad, mottled eyes of poor Edward. Edward's calls now grew a trifle more frequent, and his hints occasionally became What he said was not to be believed, even in century dead and haunted Arkham, but he threw out his dark lore with sincerity and convincingness which made one fear for his sanity. He talked about terrible meetings in lonely places, cyclopean ruins in the heart of the mountains beneath, staircases that lead down to the abyss of night at sea, of complex angles that led through invisible walls to other regions of space and time, and of hideous exchanges of personality that permitted explorations in remote and forbidden places, on other worlds and in different space-time. He would now and then back up certain crazy hints by exhibiting objects with utterly non-polar, elusively coloured and bafflingly textured objects I'd nothing ever heard of on Earth, and whose insane curves and surfaces answered no conceivable purpose and followed no conceivable geometry. These things, he said, came from outside, and his wife knew how to get them. Sometimes, but always in frightened and ambiguous whispers, he would suggest things about the old Ephraim Wade, whom he had seen at the college library. These admirations were never specific, but seemed to revolve around the especially horrible doubt as to whether the old wizard was dead, and his spiritual as well, Orioles. At times, Derby would halter rapidly in his revelations, and I wondered whether Asenath had possibly divined his speech at a distance and cut him off through some unknown sort of empathic memorism, some power of the kind she displayed at the school. Certainly, she suspected me that he told me things, but as the weeks passed, she tried to stop his visits with the words and glances with the most inexplicable potency. And only with difficulty could he get to see me, although he would pretend to be going somewhere else. Some invisible force would generally clog his motions or make him forget his destination of. His visits usually came when Asenath was away in her own body, the oddly. She's always found out later. The servants watched his goings and comings, but evidently she thought it inexpedient to do anything drastic. Sipping some orange spiced tea and got some sourdough. Oh, lovely. We'll make the most of it, Sarah. Absolutely. Enjoy it, Sarah. That sounds wonderful. Love you too, Sarah. Glad to hear you're looking after yourself and treating yourself. You bloody well should be. York Senpai Harem 69. Thank you for the follow. That is quite a name. So much for the follow and to welcome. Chapter 4. Lord, I see some pretty difficult names. Derby had been married more than 3 years on that August day when I got on the telegram train. I had not seen him for 2 months, but I've heard that he was away on business. Asenath was supposed to be with him, though watchful gossips declared there was someone upstairs in the house and behind the doubly windows. They had watched the purchases made by the servants, and now the town marshal of Chisnook had wired of the draggled madman who stumbled out of the woods with delirious raving screamed to me. It was Edward, and he had been just able to recall his own name, my name, and address. Chesnacook is close to the wildest, deepest, and least explored forest belt in Maine, and it took a whole day of feverishly jolting through fantastic and forbidding scenery to get here in a car. I found Derby in a cell at the town farm, vacillating between frenzy and apathy. He knew me at once and began pouring out a meaningless, half-incoherent torrent of words in my direction. "Man, for God's sake! The pit of the Shoggoths. Down the 6,000 steps. The abomination of abominations. I would never let her take me, and then I found myself there. Yeah, Savr, no wrath. The shape rose up from the altar, and there were 500 that howled. The hooded thing bleated, Gamog, Gamog. That was the old Ephraim's secret name in the coven. I was there, where she promised she wouldn't take me. A minute before I was locked in the library, and then I was there where she had gone with my body, in a place of utter blasphemy, the unholy pit, where the black realm begins, and the watcher guards the gate. I saw Rashal. She changed shape. I can't stand it. I won't stand it. I'll kill her if she ever sends me the gear. Kill that Antony. Her, him, it. I'll kill it. I'll kill it with my own hands. It took me an hour to quiet him, but it subsided at last. The next day I got him decent clothes in the village and set out with him for Arkham. His fury of hysteria was spent, and he was inclined to be silent. They began muttering darkly to himself when the car passed through Augusta, as if he, sight of the city, aroused memories. It was clear that he did not want to go home, and considering the fantastic delusions he seemed to have about his wife, delusions undoubtedly springing from some actual hypnotic ordeal subjected, I thought it would be better if he did not. I would, I resolved, put him up myself for a time, no matter what unpleasantries I make with us. Later, I would help him get him divorced, but most assuredly there were mental factors which made this marriage suicidal for him. When we struck open country again, Derby's muttering, and I let him nod and drowse on the seat behind me as I... During our sunset dash through, the muttering commenced again, more distinctly than before, and as I listened I caught the stream of utterly insane drivel about Asenath. The extent to which that he had preyed on Edward's nerves was plain. We had woven a whole set of hallucinations of his present predicament, he mumbled furtively, was only one of a long series. She was getting hold of him, and he knew that some day she would never let go. Even now, she probably let him only go when she had to, probably because she couldn't hold on long at a time. She constantly took his own body and went to nameless places for nameless right, leaving him in her body and locking him upstairs, but sometimes she could, and he would find himself suddenly in his own body again in some far-off, horrible, perhaps unknown place. Sometimes she'd get a hold of him again, and other times she... Often he was left stranded somewhere as I had found him. Time and time again he had to find his way home from frightful distances, getting somebody to drive the car after he found it. The worst thing was that she was holding on to him longer and longer at a time. She wanted to be a man, to be fully human. That was why she got hold of him. She had sensed the mixture of the fine wrought brain and weak will within him. Some day she would crowd him out and disappear with his body, disappear to become a great magician like her father, and leave him marooned in that shell that wasn't quite human. He knew about the Innsmouth blood now. There had been traffic with things from the sea, horrible. An old Ephraim. He had known in secret, and when he did grew an old hideous thing to keep alive. He wanted to live forever. Asenath would succeed. One successful demonstration had taken place. As Derby muttered on, I took a look at him closely, verifying the impression of change which only a screw had given me. Paradoxically, he seemed in better shape than usual, hardier, more developed, and without a trace of sickly flabbiness that caused him by his habits. It was as if he'd been incredibly active and properly exercised for the first time in his caudal life. and I judged that Asenath's thoughts must have pushed him to untold channels of motion. But just now his mind was in a pitiable state. He was mumbling wild extravagances about his wife, about black magic, about old Ephraim, and about some revelation that would convince even me. It repeated names which I recognized from bygone browsings of forbidden volumes, and at times made me shudder with a certain thread of mythological consistency, convincing coherence which ran through his wandering. Again and again he would pause, as if to gather courage for some final, terrible disclosure. Dan, don't you remember him? The wild eyes, the upkept beard, the never turned white? He glared at me once. I never forgot it. Now she glares at me that way, and I know why. He founded the Necronomicon. Formula. I don't dare tell you the page yet, but when I do, you can read and understand. Then you will know what has engulfed me. On and on and on and on, body to body to body. He means to never die. Life glow. He knows how to break the link. It can flicker on even while the body is dead. I'll give you hints. Shh. Maybe you'll guess. Listen, Dan. You know why my wife always takes such pains with that silly backhand writing? Have you ever seen a manuscript of the old Ephraims? You want to know why I shivered when I saw some hasty-nosed Sasseneth jot it down? Sasseneth. Is there such a person? Why did they half think there was poison in old Ephraim's stomach? Why do the Gilmans whisper about the way he shrieked like a frightened child when he went mad and Asenath locked him in the padded attic room where the other had been? Was it old Ephraim's soul that was locked in? Locked in by whom? And when had been looking for months for someone with a fine mind and a weak will? Why did he curse his daughter that wasn't a son? Tell me, Daniel Upton, what devilish exchange was perpetrated in the house of horror where the blasphemous monster had his trusting, weak-willed, half-human child at its mercy? He make it permanent. That's the shield you so in the end with me. Tell me why that thing called itself Asenath writes differently when off guard, so that you can't tell its script from... Then, the thing happened. Derby's voice was rising to a thin, treble scream as he raved, when suddenly it was shut off at an almost maniacal clip. I thought of other occasions at my home, where his confidences had abruptly ceased when I had half fancied sure telepathic wave of Asenath's mental force was intervening to keep him silent. This was something altogether different, and I felt infinitely more horrible. The face beside me was twisted almost unrecognizably for a moment, and while through the whole body there passed a shivering motion, as if all the bones, organs, muscles, nerves, and glands were adjusting themselves to a radically different posture, set of stresses, and general personality. Just where the supreme horror lay, I could not tell my life. Yet it swept over me such a swampering wave of sickness, repulsion, and such a freezing, petrifying sense of utter alienage and abnormality that my grasp of the wheel grew feeble and uncertain. The figure beside me seems less like a lifelong friend than like more of a monstrous intrusion from outer space, some damnable, utterly accursed focus of unknown and malign consequences. I'd faltered only for a moment, but before another moment was my companion had seized the wheel and forced me to change places with him. The dusk was very thick, and the lights important were far behind, so I knew I could not see much of his face. The blaze of his eyes, though it was phenomenal, I knew must now be in that queerly energized state, so unlike his usual self, which so many people. It seemed odd, incredible, that listless Edward Derby, he who could never assert himself, and who had never learned to drive, should be ordering me about and taking the wheel of my own car. Yet that is precisely what it is. He did not speak for some time, and, in my inexplicable horror, I was glad he did not. In the nights of Bedford and Seiko, I saw his firmly set mouth and shivered at the blaze of his eyes. The people were right. He did look damnably like his wife and old Ephraim when in his moods. I did not wonder what the moods were dislike. There was certainly something unnatural, diabolical. I felt the sinister element all the more because the wild ravings I was hearing. This man, for all of my lifelong knowledge of Edward Pickman Derby, was a stranger, an intrusion of some form. Yes. He did not speak until we were on a dark stretch of road, and when he did, his voice seemed utterly unfamiliar. It was a deeper, firmer, more decisive than I had ever known it to be, while his accent and pronunciation were altogether unchanged, though very changed. Vaguely, remotely, and rather disturbingly recalling something I could not quite place. Rena Belladonna. Hello, Governor. How are you doing? Hello, Governor. Hope you're doing well. There was, I thought, a trace of very profound and genuine irony in the timbre. No, the flashy, meaninglessly jaunty pseudo-irony of the callow sophisticate, which Derby had habitually, but something grim, basic, pervasive, and potentially evil. I marvelled at the self-possession so soon following the spell of panic-struck muttering. I hope you'll forget my attack back there, Upton, he was saying. You know what my nerves are, and I guess you can excuse such things. I'm enormously grateful, of course, for this lift home, and you must forget, too, any crazy things I might have been saying about my wife, and about things in general. That's just what comes from an overstudy in a field like mine. My philosophy is full of bizarre concepts, and where the mind gets worn out, it cooks up all sorts of imaginary concrete. I shall take a rest from now on. You probably won't see me for some time, and you needn't blame Asenath. Thank you for the follow, Arpanadom. I hope I said that right. Thank you very much. Thank you kindly. This trip was a bit queer, but it's really very simple. There are certain Indian relics in the north of the wood, standing stones and all that, which mean a good deal in folklore, and Asenath and I are following that. It was hard search, so I seem to have gone off my head. I must send for somebody for the car when I get home. The month's relaxation will put me back on my feet. I do not recall what my own part of the conversation was. The baffling alienage of my seatmate filled all of my consciousness. With every moment, my feeling of elusive cosmic horror increased, till at length I was in a virtual delirium of longing for the end of the drive. Derby did not offer to relinquish the wheel, and I was glad of the speed of which Portsmouth and Newbury flashed by. At the junction where the main highway runs inland and avoids Innsmouth, I was half afraid my driver would take the bleak shore road that goes through that damnable place. He did not, however, but darted rapidly past Rowley and Ipswich towards our destination. We reached Arkham before midnight, and found the night salon at the old Crown and Shield house. Derby left the car with a hasty repetition of his thanks, and I drove home alone with a curious feeling of relief. It had been a terrible drive, all the more terrible because I could not quite tell why, and I do not regret Derby's forecast, the long absence from my company. It's gonna take a drink. The next 2 months were full of rumours. People spoke of seeing Derby more and more in his new energized state, and Asenath was scarcely ever in her few callers. I only had one visit from Edward when he called briefly in his car, duly reclaimed from whether he had left Maine, to get some books he had lent me. He was in this new state and paused only long enough for some evasive polite remarks. It was plain that he had nothing to discuss with me in this condition, and I noticed that he did not even trouble to give the old 3 and 2 signal when ringing the door. As on that evening in the car, I felt a faint, infinitely deep horror of which I could not explain, that his swift departure was always a prejudice. In mid-September, Derby was away for a week for some decadent college set talked knowingly of the matter, hinting at a meeting with a notorious cult leader, lately expelled from England, who had established headquarters in New York. For my part, I could not get that strange ride from Maine out of my head. The transformation I had witnessed had affected me so profoundly that I had caught myself again and again trying to account for the thing, and for the extreme horror that spied within me. But the oddest rumours were those about the sobbing in the old Cranon shield hands. The voice seemed to be a woman's, and some of the younger people thought it sounded like Asenath's. It was heard only at rare intervals, and would sometimes be choked off as if... There was talk of an investigation, but this was dispelled one day when Asenath appeared in the streets and chatted in a sprightly way with a large number of acquaintances, apologizing for her recent absence and speaking instantly about the nervous breakdown and hysteria of a guest from Boston. The guest was never seen, but Asenath's appearance left nothing to... And then someone complicated matters by whispering that the soul had once or twice been in a man's voice. One evening in mid-October, I heard the familiar 3 and 2 ring at the front door. Answering it myself, I found Edward on the steps and saw at the moment that his personality was the old one, the one I had not encountered since the day of his ravings, the terrible ride, Chestnut. His face was twitching, with a mixture of odd emotion in which fear and triumph seemed to share dominion, and he looked furtively over his shoulder as I closed the door. He followed me clumsily into the study, asking for some whiskey to steady his nerves. I forbore to question him, but waited until he felt like beginning whatever he wanted to say. At length he had ventured into some information in a choking voice. Asenath has gone down. We had a long talk last night when the servants were out. I made her promise to stop preying on me. Of course, I had certain occult defenses I had never told her. She had to give in, rightfully angry. Just packed up and started for New York. Walked right out to catch the 8:20 into Boston. I suppose people will talk, but I can't help that. She didn't mention there was any trouble, just say she's gone on a long research trip. She's probably going to stay with one of her horrible groups of devotees. I hope she'll go west and get a divorce. Anyhow, I made her promise to keep her away and let me alone. It was horrible, Dad. She was stealing my body, crowding me out, making a prisoner of me. I laid low and pretended to let her do it, but I had to be on the watch. I could plan if I was careful, for she can't read my mind literally or in detail. All she can do is read of my planning with sort of a general mood of... She always thought that I was helpless. Never thought I could get the best of her, but I had a spell or two that worked. Adobe looked over his shoulder. More whiskey. I paid off those damned servants this morning when they got back. They were ugly about it and asked questions, but they weren't. They're her kind, Innsmouth people, and were hand and glove with her. I hope they'll let me alone. I didn't like the way they laughed when I walked away. I must get as many of Dad's old servants again as I can, and I'll move back home now. I suppose you think I'm crazy, Dan, but dark history on sort of hints of things that back up after what I've told you, and what I'm going to tell you. You've seen one of the changes, too. In your car, after I told you about Asenath, the day coming home from Maine, it was that when she got me. Drove me out of my body. Last thing on the ride I remember was when I was worked up trying to tell you what what the she-devil is. And she got me. And in a flash, I was back at the house, in the library, where those damn servants locked me up. And in that cursed fiend's body. That is even human. You know? It was she you must have ridden home with. That praying wolf in my body. You ought to have known the difference. I shuddered as Derby paused. Surely I had known the difference. Yet I could accept an explanation as insane as this. But my distraction call-up was growing even wilder. I had to save my... I had to, Dan. She had me for good at Hallowmass. They got a hold on the Sabbath there beyond the Chisholm-Cook, and the sacrifice would have clinched things. She'd have got me for good. She'd have been I, and I'd have been she. Never. Too late. My body had been hers for good. She would have been a man and fully human just as she wanted to be. I suppose she'd have put me out the way, killed her own ex-body with me in it, damn her. Just as she did before. Just as he, or it before. Edward's face was now atrociously distorted. He bent it uncomfortably close to mine as his voice fell to... You must know what I hinted in the car. That she isn't Asenath at all, but really whatever in himself. I'd expected it a year and a half ago, but I now know. Her handwriting shews it when off the guard. Sometimes she jots down a note in writing that's just like her father's manuscript, stroke for stroke, and sometimes she says things that nobody but an old man like Ephraim could say. He changed forms of her when she felt death coming. She was the only one he could find with the right kind of brain and a weak enough will. Got her body permanently, just as she almost got mine, and then poisoned the old body he put her into. Haven't you seen old Ephraim's soul glaring out of that she-devil's eyes 12 times? And out of mine when she had control of my body? The whisper was panting, and then paused for breath. I said nothing, and when he resumed his noise, he was nearer normal. This, I reflected, was a case for the asylum, but I could not be the one to send him. Perhaps time and freedom from Asenath would work. I could see that he would never wish to dabble in the morbid occultism again. I'll tell you more later. I must have a long rest now. I'll tell you something of the forbidden horrors she led me into, something of the age-old horrors that even now are festering in and out of the corners with a few monstrous priests alive. Some people know things about the universe nobody ought to know, and can do things that nobody ought to be able to do. I've been up to it in my neck, but that's the end. Today I'd burn the damned Necronomicon and all the rest if I was librarian of the Miskatonic. She can't get me now. I must get out of that accursed house as soon as I can and settle down at home. You'll help me. I know if I need help. Those devilish servants, you know, and people should get too inquisitive about Asenath. You see, I can't give them her address. Then there are certain groups of searchers, certain cults. I misunderstand our breaking up. Some of them have damnably curious ideas and methods. I know you'll stand by me if anything happens, even if I should tell you that will shock you. I had Edward stay and sleep in one of the guest chambers that night, and in the morning he seemed calmer. We discussed the certain possible arrangements for his moving back to the Derby mansion, and I hoped he would lose no time in making a change. He did not call the next evening, but I saw him frequently during the ensuing weeks. We talked as little as possible about the strange and unpleasant things, but discussed the renovation of the old Derby house, and the travels which Edward promised to take with me the following summer. Of Asenath we said almost nothing, for I thought that the subject was a disturbing one. Gossip, of course, was rife, but there was no novelty in the connection with the strange menage at the old Crown's Inn Shield house. One thing I did not like was what Derby Blanca let fall an over-expansive mood of the mythical about the checks. Edward was sending regularly to a Moses and Abigail Sargent and Eunice Babison in Innsmouth. It looked like as if those evil-faced servants were extorting some kind of tribute from me. Yet he had not mentioned the matter to me. I wished that the summer, and my son's Harvard vacation would come, they would get cared for Edward in Europe. He was not, I soon saw, mending as rapidly as I hoped he would, but there was something a bit hysterical in his occasional exaggeration, while his moods of fright and depression were altogether too frequent, and the old Derby house was ready by December, yet Edward constantly put off moving. Though he hated and seemed to fear the Crown and Shield place, he was at the same time queerly enslaved by it. He could not seem to begin dismantling things, and invented every kind of excuse to postpone such an act. When I pointed this out to him, he appeared unaccountably frightened. His father's the older butler, who was also there with a real quiet family of servants, told me one day that Edward's occasional prowlings about the house, and especially down cellar, looked odd and unwholesome. I wondered if Nathaniel had been writing disturbing letters, but the butler said there was no mail which would have come. Hello, Raven. Unfortunately, no, it would appear you cannot. All redeems are turned off. But how are you? It's a pleasure to see you. I tell you what, I'm glad I do have them off, because you are trouble with those text-to-speeches. And now I have the Loki one unlocked. Good lord. You would get up to some mayhem. Sip, sip. Well, that's good. At least I'll have a moment of peace in my mind for a while, and hope you're doing well. Thank you for stopping by. Unfortunately not. Not when it comes to Tangier. He can try, but I don't think he'd be able to. Unfortunately so. It is annoying. I wish there was an option. Chapter 6. Ooh. Ooh, very nice. Oh yes, I'm very excited. I mean, I don't know what to expect. I know nothing of the game. I'm playing, what is it, Craftopia? Craftorium? Yeah, no, I'm very excited. Craftopia, that's the one. I would have refunded him, don't worry, I would have refunded him. Tiger Shark, plain guy, what a great name. So much to follow, welcome in. You're doing well. We're just about to read chapter 5. Are we on chapter 5? Is it chapter 5? I think it's chapter 5. Oh no, chapter 6. My apologies. Chapter 6 of That Thing on the Doorstep. It was about Christmas that Derby broke down one evening while calling on me. Now I was steering the conversation to Summer's travels when he suddenly shrieked and leapt up from his chair with a look of shocking uncontrollable. A cosmic panic and loathing such as only the nether gods from a nightmare could bring to any sane brain. Thank you for the lurk, Raven, of course. Enjoy your cutting. Oh, enjoy. Oh, that's exciting. Enjoy. Thank you for stopping by. It means the world to me. Oh, Raven's a cool bean. Oh, please do. I would love to see. cosmic panic and loathing, such as one only the never gulfs of nightmare could bring to any sane mind. Breathe. My breathe. Dan is tugging for the beyond and knocking, clawing that she-devil, even now effring. Amok, the pit, the shoggoths, yeah. The shove, Nigrath, the goat with 1,000 young. The flame, the body beyond the life in the earth, oh God. I pulled him back to his chair and poured some wine down his throat, for his frenzy sank to a dull apathy. He did not resist, but kept his lips moving as if talking to himself. Presently I realized that he was trying to talk to me and bent my ear to his mouth to catch. Again she's trying. I might have known. Nothing can stop the force. Nor distance, nor magic, nor death. It just comes and comes, mostly in the night. I can't leave. It's horrible. Oh God, Dan. If only you knew as I do just how horrible it is. When... God damn it, Raven. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. Raven distracted me, I'm so sorry. Hello, Kahima. Lovely to have you here, Kahima. Nothing by. The dramatic dialogue, and then I just get interrupted by bloody 3-year-old Raven. When he had slumped down into a stupor, I propped him with pillows and let normal sleep over him. And I did not call a doctor, for I knew what would be said of his son. I wished to give nature a chance if I possibly could. He waked at midnight, and I put him to bed upstairs, but he was gone by morning. He had let himself out quietly of the house, and his butler, when called on the wire, said he was at home pacing restlessly around the library. Everything went to pieces rapidly after that. He did not call again, but I went daily to see him. He would always be sitting in his library, staring at nothing and having an air of abnormal listening. Sometimes he talked rationally, but always on trivial topics. Any mention of his trouble or plans or Asenath would send him into a frenzy, and his butler said he had frightful seizures at night, during which he might eventually do harm. I had a long talk with his doctor, banker, and lawyer, and finally took the physician with 2 specialist colleagues to visit him. The spasms that resulted from the first questions were violent and excitable, and that evening a close car took his poor, struggling body into the Arkham Sanitarium. I was made his guardian and called on him twice weekly, almost weeping to hear his wild shriek. Awesome whispers and dreadful repetitions of such phrases as, "They had to do it. They had to do it. It will get me, it will get me down there in the dark. Mother, Dad, save me, save me." How much hope of recovery there was, no one could say. But I tried my best to be optimistic. Edward must have a home if he emerged, so I transferred his servants to the Derby mansion, which would surely be his insane. What to do about Crowns and Shield Place, with its complex arrangements and collections of utterly inexplicable objects, I could not decide. So I left it momentarily untouched, telling the Derby housemaid to go over and dust the chief rooms once a week, and ordering the furnace man to leave the fire on. Shepherd, I see you. What are you doing spamming chat? You're doing well. Sorry, I've got my dinner next to me, so I'm doing like little nibbles. I don't want it to get too cold. Just a lot of energy. What implemented at work, you muppet? Shepherd, no more, please. You cheek. The final nightmare came before Candlemas. heralded in cruel irony by the false gleam of hope. One morning in late January, the sanitarium telephoned to report that Edward's reason had suddenly come back. His continuous memory, they said, was badly impaired, but sanity itself was certain. Of course, he must remain some time for observation, but there could be little doubt of the outcome. All going well, he would surely be free in a week. I hastened over in a flood of delight, but stood bewildered when a nurse took me to Edward. The patient rose to greet me, extending his hand with a polite smile, but I saw in an instant that he bore the strangely energized personality which seemed so foreign to his own nature. The competent personality I had found so vaguely horrible, which Edward himself had once vowed was the intruding soul. Thank you for the love and the lamp. Thank you for the lamp to agonize. I'm gonna sneeze. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, that's so rude of me. Oh dear, excuse me. Sorry about that. Thank you. Thank you. It was the same blazing vision, so like other nurse, an old Ephraim, and the same firm mouth. And then when I spoke, I could sense the same grim, pervasive irony in his. The deep irony is so redolent or potent even, that this person who'd been driven my car through the night 5 months before, and the person I had not seen since the brief call had forgotten the old-time door signal, and stirred such nebulous fears in me. And now he filled me with the same dim feeling of blasphemous alienation and ineffable cosmic fierceness. Chap blesses you for God and anime on our side. I love that. What Dragon Knight? No, it doesn't. Shut up. That's such a weird thing to think about. Thanks for that. Cursed image. He spoke affably of arrangements for release, and there was nothing for me to do but assist despite some remarkable gaps in recent memory. Yet I felt something was terribly, inexplicably wrong and abnormal. There were horrors in this thing that I could not reach. This was the same person, but was it indeed Derby I'd know? If not, who or what was it, and where was Edward? Ought it be free or confined, or ought it to be excerpted from the face of the earth? There was a hint of the abysmally sardonic in everything the creature said. The Azimuth eyes lent a special and baffling mockery to certain words as the early liberty earned by especially close confinement. I must have behaved very awkwardly, and was glad to be a retreat. All that day and the next, I racked my brain over the problem. What had happened? What sort of mind looked out for those alien eyes? Edward's. All I could think of nothing was the dismal, terrible enigma, and gave up all efforts to perform my usual work. The second morning the hospital called up to say that the recovered patient was unchanged, and by the evening I was close to a nervous collapse. A state, I admit, though others will vow it coloured in subsequent vision. I have nothing to say on this point that I had no magnetism would account for all evidence. Chapters. Okay, last chapter. It's only because, like I said, I've got my dinner next to me. So I'm like, Took it out, and I put it on my desk, and I'm like, oh yeah. A final chapter. It is at the night after that second evening that stark, utter horror burst over me and weighted my spirit with black, clutching panic from which it could never shake through. It began with a telephone call just before midnight. No, I was the only one up, and I sleepily took down the receiver in the library. No one seemed to be on the wire, and I was about to hang up and go to bed when my ear caught a very faint suspicion of a sound at the other. Someone trying under great difficulties to talk. As I'd listened, I thought I heard a sort of half-liquidous bubbling noise, The glub, glub, glub were an odd suggestion of inarticulate, unintelligible word and syllable division. I called out, "Who is it?" but the only answer was glub, 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 glub. I could only assume that the noise was mechanical, but fancying that it might be a cease of a broken instrument, I am able to receive but not signal back to send. I added, "I can't hear you. Better hang up and try information." I immediately heard the receiver go on the hook. Thank you for the snow powder and the head pats, Holy Swordsman. Thank you, snow powder. This, I say, was just before midnight. When the call was traced afterwards, it was found to come from the old Crown's Inn Shield house, though it was fully half a week from the houseman's day to be there. I shall only hint at what was found at the house. The upheaval in the remote cellar storeroom, the tracks, the dirt, the hastily rifled wardrobe, the baffling marks on the telephone, the clumsily used stationery, and the detestable stench lingering on everything. The police, poor fools, have had their smug little theories and still searching for those sinister discharged servants who dropped out of sight amidst the present furore. They speak of a ghoulish revenge for things that were done, and I say it included because I include Edward's best friend and advisor. Dark Ryu, hello! I hope you're doing well. A very happy New Year to you. I hope you had a good holiday. And I hope you're just doing well in general. Wonderful to see you around. Thank you so much. Of course, no worries. Please take care at work. Hope it's not bullying you too much. Take care. Oh, I'm glad to hear that. I really am. I was included because I was Edward's best friend and advisor. Idiots. Do they fancy those brutish crowns could have forged that handwriting? Do they fancy that they could have brought what later came? Are they blind to the changes in that body was Edward? As for me, I now believe all that Edward Derby had ever told me. That there are horrors beyond life's edge that we do not suspect. And once in a while, man's evil prying calls them just within our range. Ephraim, Athena, the devil called them in. They engulfed Edward as they are engulfing me. Can I be sure that I am safe? Those powers survive their life to the physical form. The next day in the afternoon, when I pulled out of my prostration, was able to walk and talk coherently, I went to the madhouse and shot him dead for Edward's and the world's sake. But can I be sure, till, that he is cremated? They are keeping the body for some silly autopsies by the different doctors, but I say he must be cremated. He must. He who was not Edward Derby, I shot him. I shall go mad if he's not. I shall maybe next. But my will is not weak, and I shall not let it be undermined of the terrors that are seething around it. One life for him, Asenath, and Edward. Who now? I will not be driven out of my body. I will not change his souls for that bullet-ridden lish in the madhouse. But let me try and tell coherently of the final horror. I will not speak of the police persistently ignored. The tales of that dwarfed, grotesque, malodorous thing met by at least 3 wayfarers in Hyacinth just before 2 o'clock, and the nature of the single footprints in certain places. I will say only that just about 2 of the doorbell knocker waked me. The doorbell and knocker both, piled alternately and uncertainly in a kind of a weak desperation, and each trying to keep Edward's old signal 3 and 2. Roused from sound sleep, my mind leaped into turmoil. Derby at the door, remembering that old code. The new personality had not remembered it. Was Edward suddenly back in his rightful state? Why was he here in such evident stress and haste? Had he been released ahead of time, or had he escaped? Perhaps, I thought as I flung on a robe and bounded downstairs. His return to his own self had brought raving and violence, revoking his discharge and driving him to a desperate dash for freedom. Whatever had happened, he was good old Edward, and I would help him. When I opened the door to the elm-arched blackness, a gust of insufferably fetid wind almost flung me prostrate. I choked in nausea. For the second scarcely saw the dwarfed, humped figure on the step. The summons had been Edward's, but who was this foul, stunted parody? Where had Edward had time to go? His ring had sounded only a second at the door. The caller had one of Edward's overcoats on, its bottom almost touching the ground, and its sleeves rolled black, yet still covering that. On the head was a slouched hat that pulled low, with a black silk muffler concealed the face. As I stepped unsteadily forward, the figure made a semi-liquid sound like that I'd heard on the telephone. Glub glub, and thrust at me a large, closely written paper, impaled end of a long pencil. Still reeling from the morbid and unaccountable fetor, I seized the paper and tried to read it and lighted the door. Beyond question, it was in Edward's script. But why had he written when he was close enough to ring? And why was the script so awkward, coarse, and shaky? I could make out nothing in the dim half-light, so edged back in the hall, the door figure clumping mechanically after but on the threshold. The odour of the singular messenger was really appalling, and I'd hoped, not in vain, thank God, that my wife would not wake and come. Then, as I read the paper, I felt my knees give under me and my vision go black. I was lying on the floor when I came to, that accursed sheet still clutched my fear-rigid hand. This, what it said. Dan, go to the sanitarium and kill it. Exterminate it. It isn't Edward Derby anymore. She'd got me. It's Asnath, and she has been dead 3 months and a half. I lied when I said she had gone away. I killed her. I had to. It was sudden, but we were alone, and I was in my right body. I saw a candlestick and smashed her head in. She would have got me at the Good Hallowmans. I buried her in the furthest cellar storeroom under some old boxes and cleansed up all the trees. The servants suspected next morning, but they have such secrets that they dare not tell. I sent them off. God knows what they or others in the cult will do. I thought for a while I'd be all right. And then I felt the tugging at my brain. I knew what it was, and I ought to have remembered. A soul like hers or Ephraim's, half-detached. It keeps right on death as long as the body lasts. She was getting at me, making me change bodies with her, seizing my body and putting me in that corpse of hers buried in the cellar. I knew it was coming. That's why I snapped and had to go to the asylum. And then it came. I found myself choked in the dark, in Asnath's rotting carcass down there in the cellar under the boxes where I'd put it. And I knew she must be in my body at the sanitarium, permanently. For it was after Hallowmass, and the sacrifice would work even without her being there. Sane, and ready for release as a menace to the world. I was desperate, and in spite of everything, I clawed my way out. I'm far too gone to talk. I couldn't badge on the telephone, but I can still write. I'll get fixed up somehow and bring you this last word and warning. Kill that fiend. If you value peace and comfort of the world, see that it is cremated. If you do not, it will live on, and the body forever and ever. I can't tell you what it will do. Keep clear of the black magic, Dan. It's the devil's business. Goodbye. Been a great friend. Tell the police whatever they'll believe, and I'm damnably sorry to drag all of this on you. I'll be at peace before long. This thing won't hold together much more. I hope you can read this. And kill that thing. Kill it. Yours, Ed It was only afterward that I read the last half of the paper, for I'd fainted at the end of the 3rd paragraph. I fainted again when I saw and smelled what clustered up at the threshold where the warm air had struck it. The messenger would not move or have consciousness any more. The butler, a tougher fibred man than I, had not faith in what met him in the hall in the morning. Instead, he telephoned the police. When they came, I had been taken upstairs to bed, but the other mass had lay where it collapsed in the night. The men put handkerchiefs to their noses. What they finally found inside Edward's oddly assorted clothes was the most quintessent horror. There were bones, too, and a crushed-in skull. Some dental work positively identified the skull as Asenath's. The Thing on the Doorstep by H.P. Lovecraft. Read by me. The Morbid Moth. And there we have it. That one is definitely one of my favorites. And I'm so glad you reminded me of it. Rena, thank you for the first time chat. Thank you for reminding me of that one. I forgot how good that one is, the build-up. And just the last paragraphs. That whole last chapter, to be fair, but that with the letter. And the idea of a corpse on your doorstep. Yeah, there we have it. Now, I know it's not been an awfully long stream today. Well done. No, thank you guys. I just hope you enjoyed it. I enjoy reading them. I just hope you guys enjoy yourself. That's, that's the main thing. Banger reading? Oh, thank you. I do try. I know I get a bit carried away in the voice acting. I have fun reading as different characters and such. I very much enjoy it. But yeah, thank you so much for being here. Sorry I can't stay for too much longer. I will be back online tomorrow, though. We'll probably be doing... What is it? We'll probably just be doing whatever we want to do. It's Friday, so we normally just go a bit wild, don't we? We normally just play whatever games take our fancy. I might do... What we haven't done again for a while, which is what I might do, is go back to maybe 3 random horror games. Not entirely sure. We'll see how we go. If not, we still have Monster Hunter that we've just started. But yeah, I'll be back on tomorrow. Was 3 o'clock... I don't know if many of you here... Was 3 o'clock a better starting time? Was the latest start a better starting time? Or do you prefer the early starts? Like yesterday, for example. Like I said, I'm trying to kind of experiment with times at the moment, just to kind of see what people prefer. I watch for now. Shepherd, you know what I mean, though. But thank you. Oh, good stretch. There we are. But yeah, thank you so much for hanging out with me. Thank you for the relaxing time. Like I said, I hope you've all enjoyed yourself. You enjoyed the stories. I find Lovecraft to just be a perfect mixture of that atmosphere and world creation, as well as the horror aspect. No, of course. Like I said, I'm going to try and do a reading stream at least once a week from now on. Which means we've got a lot of things to get through. A lot of reading to do. Yeah, I'm gonna go and eat my... No, it's still warm, it's still warm. I'm gonna go and eat my warm dinner now. It's still tepid, I'm happy with that. I really didn't think the time either, I put it in. And then we were in the chapter and I was like, oh, my dinner's done and it's hot. I'm gonna miss it, but no, it's fine. I don't need to zap it in the microwave to ruin it. We're all good. Well, I'm going to head off now, have some dinner, and have a restful evening. I hope you have a wonderful day, night, morning, evening, whatever it is for you. I hope you have a delightful... No, cool. You don't have... Especially with streams like that, I don't expect people to be spamming chat. That'd be silly. Now, let's... Anybody is online, we can go. Hello, Greybeard. You're just in time for us to leave, but thank you so much. Also, an ad is starting in 20 seconds. I'm sorry, I can't pause it. I've literally been pausing like every ad as well. Bloody things. I was in line at the bank when a man got pulled and escorted out by security. James tattooed around. Apparently, they don't allow firearms in the... Oh my lord. Don't allow firearms. Oh my day. Where do you... Honestly. Do you get these from? I don't know, but yeah, thank you so much. Just trying to find someone to raid. And just anyone's got. Wait, what? What? Oh, come on then. What do you call a dead magician? An abracadabra. Okay. Okay, that was a good one. And on that note, I'm going to send everyone over to Squeaku. She is playing some Dead by Daylight. She has a nice cozy vibe about her as well, though is more in tune with our chaotic side. You guys know her. She is chaos. She is rat. And also I think it makes sense. Because we read the rats in the walls, you know what I mean? I think it makes sense. I think it goes well with the theming of the stream, doesn't it? We started with rats, and we shall go and give the love to a rat. So yeah, what we've learned from today's stream. Oh, is that... Apparently I'm under the egg. Hello. What we learned from today's stream is, don't, go into underground caverns underneath old buildings, because they might have horrendous rat abominations in that'll eat. And then your cat will try and get your neck. And just be careful of who you're talking to. Are they really who they say they are? Feel your mind slipping through the gap. A good old tight grip on it if I were you. Take care now. Doodle pip, cheerio. Goodbye. Oh. But yeah. Oh no, the raid stopped. Why did the raid stop? What? Why did it stop? That's rude. I hate it when it does that. It does that sometimes. But yeah, have a wonderful day. Do whatever raid message you want. We don't. Oh, she better not have ended. Oh no, she's on the be right back screen. Oh, that's fine. We'll still get her. We'll still get her. It's fine. We're all relaxing. But yeah, have a wonderful day, night, morning, evening, whatever it is for you. I hope you have an absolutely delightful. Thank you so much for being here. Remember, you are important. You are loved. Just be yourself. Okay, treat yourself as well. Go on, you deserve it. Doodle pip, cheerio. and all of that jazz. I'll see you very soon. Goodbye for now, and thank you. Goodbye. Moth bait.